Foley.
Here.
Azina.
Here.
Gabbard. Appeal.
Yeah, I couldn't get the bubble in place.
Hinton.
Here.
Concalves. Pizarro.
Here.
Stern. Sedani.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Valverde.
Here.
And Baxter and Delson are both here, correct? All right, so we'll move into the approval of the minutes from October 10th, 2018.
Next time.
Quick reminder that if you were not there, you must abstain from this meeting.
Okay.
All in favor of approving the minutes from the 2017, October 2017, what am I saying? The 18th of October 2017, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please signify by saying nay. Any abstentions? Of course. Great. Now we'll move into reports. We'll start with the report of the program chairperson.
Hi there, everyone. So this week, programs finally was able to roll out our preliminary inventory check for a select 12 student organizations. We've already gotten a lot of responses, a lot of really good questions. So that has been really exciting because it's a positive first step in actually keeping track of our inventory that we are sending out. Additionally, we have been talking about a tap-and-go mobile food ordering system as well as a line bike program that approached us wanting to be established on campus. So that's what we've been discussing in our committee. And that's pretty much everything that we have. Does anyone have any questions?
Okay, so one thing that we need to get better at in the Senate is asking questions of chairs. We often forget that our role is to sort of keep committees not in check, but understand fully what they're doing. So I'm going to start off by asking a question. How many people attend programs?
Today we have 6 people that are meeting.
Okay, and what's usual?
We usually have, I think, 7. We have one who's passed today.
Okay, and what do you guys talk about at your meeting?
Today, let me see, I have a list of everything we talked about. We discussed the line budget program, and we talked about going to the current UCONN bike sharing program just to talk about whether or not that's a conflict of interest. We also had a member from FSAE come in, and she shared her experience with the inventory system and filling it out, so that was really important to get the perspective from the other side. We talked about our textbook exchange program and some steps that we might take in terms of figuring out how we could incentivize students who want to come in and bring their textbooks in and exchange them for a textbook for a future class. We also talked about how we might be able to keep track of those textbooks. And then we also talked about our free printing day that we're sponsoring in December during the finals and approved funding for that.
Awesome. Are there any further questions for the programs director or the executive director? Schroeder?
How much money was it?
We were able to approve $2,000 in funding for free printing, which is really exciting because that will be able to help about 3,000 print jobs in the library. So we're really excited.
Senator Sheen? Parliamentarian Joe?
What other initiatives of programs would hire volunteers? Besides
Right now, we don't have any other ones. If we wanted to sponsor a different program on campus, then we might consider moving towards approving funding for that. But right now, we have no other initiatives.
and can I just ask how much is the budget? What could you like?
Our total budget, it includes the New York Times, the free printing, the stuff like that. I think that it was like $45,000 for the semester. Yes, because the New York Times is $50,000 for the year. Oh, and then we also have SOC employee wages under my budget.
You said that there were 12 organizations you chose to take inventory on. How were those 12 programs chosen? Like, are they 12 biggest, or was it randomly chosen out of that?
So there are actually 15 different divisions of organizations that are currently on campus. And so we wanted to highlight the experience of one organization from each of those 15 different options. But then we realized that there are some types of organizations that have actually never requested any funding for specific inventory. For example, Greek organizations and academic organizations do not currently hold any inventory. So we selected different groups, or we selected groups based off of the size, how much inventory they have requested, and so we chose, for example, Formula SAE because they do have a lot of inventory, but they also have a lot of consumables, so we wanted to see how they were keeping track of that. We chose the Outing Club because we know that they have an inventory system that is in place for their own personal club. We chose Airsoft because we have also funded a lot of actual equipment for them. So we tried to get a wide range just so that we had a general understanding of the student experience and not just one niche group.
Thank you.
Any further questions for the program's chair? All right, thank you. Seeing none, we'll move into the report of the student development chair.
Hi everyone, so currently in student development, we've been working a lot on the Met and Way events, which is taking place next Wednesday at November 8th. There's going to be a day full of events. The 3 events that student development has been working on, our first is called Leave a Mark. So we're going to be tabling on Fairfield Way and asking the UConn community the question, what can you do to prevent racism here and everywhere? And they'll be writing their responses on oak leaves, and then we're later going to make a visual display and put it up somewhere on campus. We haven't decided on that yet, but we were going to discuss that in our meeting tomorrow. Our second event is we're partnering with the Together project. It's called Together, Confronting Our Past and Fixing Our Future. It's going to be an informational session about the UConn's history with racism on campus, and then what we can do to move forward and confront it as a community. And then our third event is we're going to be screening the documentary 13th, and there will be a brief discussion and refreshments following the screening of the documentary.
Are there any questions for the chairperson? Senator Hagan.
So what specifically is student development working with the future project on? Has that been decided yet, or?
Oh, you mean the Together project?
Yeah.
So the event Together, Confronting Our Past and Fixing Our Future, the first half of the event is going to be, there's going to be like a presentation just about racism on campus, and then the second half is going to be an open dialogue between people at the event and members of the Together project in ways we can confront racism and come together as a community to move forward. Any other questions? Yes. No, so we're also working on consent posters and getting those up around campus, and then prepping for our next semester's events. We kind of have like tabled the consent posters right now just because Met and Way have popped up really quickly. We only had a month to do the 3 events.
Okay. Any further questions for the chairperson? How many people came to the student development?
We currently have 11 members.
Okay, awesome. And is that membership up or down over the past semester? Is it the biggest committee you've had or the smallest committee you've had? Is it growing?
Well, this is my first semester chairing, but I think we have a few more than last semester. But if you're interested, or we have meetings tomorrow at 5 p.m. in the SOC conference room for anybody that wants to stop by.
Okay. Are there any further questions for the student development chair? Okay, thank you. Next, we'll move into the report of the student services chair.
Hello everyone, I hope you all are doing well. So Student Services has a lot going on. Tampon Time has been pretty successful. We've been going in and replacing the dispensers. We haven't had anyone stealing any of the dispensers in the past 2.5 weeks, so improvement, student body. we're keeping tabs on the amount of products that are being used, and at our last meeting, there was a lot of suggestions on where we can expand and how we make the program more inclusive. So we're going to be taking that into account definitely and trying to get more contribution from the student body as to where we want to expand next semester. And if we are to expand, we are going to have to increase our possible funds, so expect a piece of legislation at some point. Another thing we're working on is with dining services and the availability of halal meat on campus. They had a meeting, I set up a meeting between Dennis, who's the director of dining services, as well as several representatives from MSA, and they met yesterday. I was unable to go. I had a mandatory meeting for the COP23 cohort, but I heard it was very successful, and she's going to be writing up a little report for me so we can see where student services can go forward in terms of representing them and seeing if they even need more student services work. The whole point of that was to connect the two parties, and it seems like that has happened. So we'll see the direction of the availability of that product on campus. In addition, our sustainability subcommittee has been working really hard on planning events for next semester. I don't know if you guys know, but next semester's Metanoia will be sustainability based. So we expect a lot of our initiatives to be done in collaboration with other parties on campus. Right now they're working on an art exhibit and are trying to bring art. People who are interested in art exhibits to contribute to an environmental justice themed art exhibit, as well as hopefully an environmental justice one-day conference where we're going to be trying to get the community all together to educate people what environmental justice is, what it means for our communities, and the different community players in environmental justice and activism. We're also having a meeting with Bursar's office and financial aid. That's been in the works for a while, but we were able to get a meeting with them next Thursday, where parties from both financial aid and Bursar's will help us in terms of creating an event on financial literacy, as well as increasing the visibility of international students in decision-making at the Bursar's office. In addition, the Dean of Students reached out to Student Services on a new program called SEEDS, which is basically a program that they want to get high-achieving undergraduate students to connect with high-achieving alumni, and it's basically a more accessible leadership legacy program if you know about that program. So hopefully L.A. Doherty will be coming to our next meeting or the next one after that, depending on her availability. And in addition, we're going to be hopefully presenting legislation today, maybe not, regarding international students and the international compliance visa fee. That's something that Student Services was approached after the meeting yesterday, and we had a couple meetings and saw that this was something that was very timely. So that's what we've been doing.
Are there any questions for the Student Services Board? Senator Crowe.
I've had a lot of friends who have been interested in the Timeline program and how it's working out, but they're not all in this body, obviously.
As in the student body or Senate?
In the Senate body,
Okay.
specifically. How, just so I can inform them, how would you suggest they learn more information about the program, and if they have any suggestions, approach you and the committee with those suggestions?
Yeah, well, I mean, the committee is open to the general student body, so you don't need to be a senator to be involved with the committee and or any of its initiatives. So if they want to join and they're not explicitly in USG, that's not a problem. At the beginning of the semester, we did post some like the links for volunteering and that kind of stuff in Buy or Sell and in the USG page. I would be happy to send that over to our representative, and we can send that out to you guys, or you can talk to me after and I can give you the link like in person. Also, they can email me at studentservices@usg.uconn.edu, and I can, give them whatever information that they need.
Senator Hagan.
Can you discuss more in depth what was talked about after last night's meeting with international students?
There's been an issue in terms of lack of transparency in terms of the international student compliance fee. So basically, the Graduate Student Government Senate was able to pass legislation regarding this lack of transparency. And basically, this past September, the university created a compliance fee that international students would need to pay in terms of being sponsored as students here. And specifically for undergraduate students, graduate students were able to get a waiver on this fee because their union met with the university and was able to get a compromise if they were teachers, TAs or GAs, and if they were T or GAs who were exempt from this fee, as a large population of GAs and TAs are international students. That waiver is not accessible to undergraduate students, which therefore leaves international students or our undergraduate students as a vulnerable population, because the talk surrounding the creation of this fee, the usage of this fee, was not done in the presence of undergraduate international students, which is a huge problem, and that lack of transparency, in my opinion, is unacceptable. And in terms of the students that approached me, approached the senator, I created the legislation like 2 hours ago with. It's something that is very timely, especially on behalf of the students that want information on this.
Any further questions? Senator Senatorial.
Not at the moment. So in terms of the locations where we put the products this semester, because this is a pilot program, we're closely monitoring the amount of products that are being used, the accessibility of those products in terms of location and who can use them. We didn't focus on dorms because if we had put them in certain dorms as of other certain dorms, it wouldn't have been accessible as other locations. However, in the constant pursuit of making this project more accessible, we will be seeing if dormitories are a place where students want to see it possibly.
Any further questions for the student services chair? I have one. How many people came to the meeting?
Approximately 13.
And how many people usually come to these meetings?
Approximately 15.
And what was discussed at this last meeting?
Everything I just said except the international.
Okay. And so, to what extent were committee members kept in the loop about the international student?
Not at all. The legislation that was created was on behalf of myself. It's not sponsored by the committee. So had that information been presented to me prior to that meeting, it would have been done. But considering how timely this is to the parties involved, this was more of a personal endeavor with me and the senator who did this.
Okay. Are there any further questions with the chairperson? Senator Schroeder.
I have one question on compliance. Should I wait for?
In the opinion of the chair, it would be optimal if we could wait for further discussion on that item for the debate on the motion to add it to our agenda, if that's amenable to the senator. Okay, fantastic. Are there any further questions for the chairperson? Senator Burke.
When is the next tampon time refilling date?
Hopefully on Thursday,
This Thursday? Tomorrow?
this Thursday.
All right.
Okay, any further questions? Thank you. We'll now move into the report of the academic affairs chair. Next, we'll move into the report of the funding board chair. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I know you all know me. I am serving as interim funding board chair right now as we're going through a transition period from Jay to myself to the next funding board chair, which President Valverde will speak more about that situation. I'm just here to update you currently on what is happening at funding board. That being that we are still trying to move along and finish up all of the funding requests that still need votes and to be processed in our office for the fall 2017 semester. So these include all the requests that were submitted by the funding deadline of October 15th for the rest of this semester, so up until our last day of the semester, which is officially December 15th, because I think the 16th is that December, right? So working on getting those requests reviewed in the system, voted on by funding board, and then processed through our office. We are hoping, I know the deadline had been, or the, excuse me, not deadline, the date had been set to open spring 2018 funding. As of today, we were informed due to technical difficulties from Mike Oatley, who oversees our whole USG funding system, that will be active tomorrow. Just on their part, they had a bit of a server error. I sadly can't speak more to that. I don't know what a server error means in that sense. So moving on with spring 2018 funding and trying to finish up fall 2017 funding so we can have a smooth transition over the winter break.
Are there any questions for the interim funding board chair? Senators?
Once funding is granted or not granted, is there a way for, let's say, it's not granted, is there a way to appeal that?
There's an appeals process. An appeal has to be submitted within 5 business days of receiving the decision. So there are dates and, like, I guess you could call deadlines around submitting an appeal, but there are certain requirements for being able to submit an appeal, which includes, off the top of my head, I can't list the 3 things. Sia can speak.
Misinterpretation of policies, funding what's part of procedural error, formalization, and discrimination again. And what's part of like here being used in there that has to be based on.
Okay. Are there any further questions for the interim funding board chair? Senator Burke.
Will there be a possibility for senators to join the committee next semester, and how will that be known?
I can't speak to that right now. I do know we prefer to keep funding for just at a smaller number in general, due to the volume of training that is required to be on the board. I am only the interim funding board chair, so I will only have control of this board for potentially 2 to 3 weeks from now. So I can't speak to what happens in the spring semester. Besides, I'm only currently working on the transition from fall to spring on behalf of the student groups right now.
Okay. And Senator Schroeder.
Because you're sitting at the chair of the board, are there any current policies that are limiting your ability to properly
I feel like that's kind of a personal question, and that I would like to say no, there's not. It's been a really smooth transition actually into this position. I do feel that it's nice that it's kind of my second time going through this, as I went through the same transition period last year as funding board chair. For those who are new senators, I did serve as funding board chair for the 2016-2017 academic year. So I've been through this once before, which is why President Valverde and myself felt that in the best interest of student groups, so that they can still receive their funding in a timely manner, we felt that I was the best person to step forward and make sure that that transition happened, as I'm the one who has been through this before in direct hands-on experience. So,
Senator Thacker.
Yeah, I just wanted to know how the new funding board chair was chosen after your interim period is over.
President Valverde will speak to that.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions for the interim chair? Thank you. We'll move into the report of the external affairs chairperson.
Hi everyone. So last time we talked a little bit, I told everyone that External was talking about looking at options like adopting a family to give back to the community, or giving thank yous to like local businesses and town offices. We decided more to go with the adopt a family idea, so we're really excited about that. We're going forward with it. So we're going to be kind of sponsoring a Thanksgiving for a family, and being able to provide them with the food and supplies that they request to enjoy their Thanksgiving. We are looking to do a couple like thank yous, even cards to local offices and municipal buildings in town. We talked about that. We actually had this week, Senator Rogalski presented the outline for the subcommittee, the Greek off-campus student subcommittee. I'm not going to speak a lot on that now because it is a very extensive outline. But if anyone has any questions, you can ask me. But you can be happy to ask either of us after as well. We're working on our legislative advocacy agenda right now. It's going to be a lot of state issues, budget issues. Unfortunately, it comes up every year. We want to have that done by Thanksgiving, hopefully bring it here in the next Senate. I don't know if that's before Thanksgiving, but we're working on it now. We'll at least have it through external before then. We're also possibly working on an event with her campus. They want to do kind of like a career fair for younger girls specifically in the community. We've been talking about an external and deciding whether we're going to move forward with it or not, but it does sound like a really good community service event, so we're thinking about it. Also, just quickly, not this past Monday, but the Monday before, we were made aware of about a half an hour before that there was a town council meeting and we should all go. That it was going to be really exciting for students. So we ran over. Quite a few people from external were there, and about 3 hours in, they started talking about those zoning regulations that we talked about here. So that legislation we passed. And the mayor himself brought up, and several members of the town council, it was kind of like a unanimous thing, that they didn't specifically agree with our legislation, that it was unconstitutional, but they did question it, which was a huge step. So they asked, they can't directly make, but they asked the town attorney to look over the zoning regulations, and I think that's a huge step in the right direction. Thank you.
Are there any questions for the chairperson?
Yeah.
Did the mayor specifically reference legislation passed by this time?
He didn't specifically reference our legislation, but he was continuing looking at our group of students, and he did bring up that there were concerns of unconstitutional aspects, which is what we put forward. So I'd like to think it was directly at us.
Okay. Senator Reynolds?
Can you tell us more about what some of the council members said in regards to the legislation?
Sure. So I think he's asking that because he was there and it was a very exciting experience. But actually some of the council members were really pushing it. So when Colin Mortimer and myself had originally talked about this at Town University Relations, we kind of played this game of the chess team does this, how are you going to respond? We kind of played that game. And actually the town council did the same thing. So one of the women said, oh, I had a croquet party at my house on Sunday, and another town council member was there. Was that in violation of the regulations? And they said, yes. But they were like, don't worry, we're not gonna go and find it. They're like, okay, but that's all we need to know. It was in violation of the regulations. So that was huge for us because we kind of played the same game, and it kind of proved the point for us. So that was really exciting.
I believe Senator Hagan had a question. Any further questions for the chairperson? I've got a few. What's the sitting roster of external affairs?
Okay, so I wrote this down to prepare. I'm not gonna lie, I don't know. Okay, so we have 20 active members currently. We have 19 people at the last meeting, and there's 34 people who have attended, but 20 is our active number based on our standing rules.
And what was discussed at the
A lot of this was discussed. The only other thing that I would have to add is we talked, gave a brief overview, Senator Reynolds did, on the state budget because that came out, and just a general overview of how that would kind of affect us, and we lightly discussed President Herb's email because it related to us.
Are there any further questions for the chairperson? No. Senator Dawson?
What is Election Day?
Election Day is November 7th, next Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any further questions? All right. Next, we'll move into the report of the chief of staff.
Hi everyone. So in terms of Kaio's report, he's been working a lot with our graphic designer Jillian on the website still. They're trying to figure out the limitations of using the UCONN website that we have right now versus just starting a new link and getting more creatively focused and making it a little more appealing. So they're playing around with all that. For me, I've been working with Lisette on planning our Leaders Guiding Leaders kickoff event. We're super excited about the mentorship program, and we've been really committed to making it effective and exciting this year. So with that said, we need you all to fill out either a mentor or mentee form. We have about 20-something responses on both, but I know there's more of you than that, so please, please fill those forms out by midnight tonight. We're going to start pairing people up tomorrow, so hopefully we'll have pairs and the kickoff event info coming out to you really soon. Yesterday, Kyle planned a reverse trick-or-treat in the office. We had students trick-or-treating in the union, coming into the USG office, getting candy, getting ice cream social shirts, and we finally got rid of the ice cream social shirts. Exciting. Special shout out to Senator Schroeder because I was very overwhelmed at the beginning of all this, and with no questions asked, he was up helping me move boxes, talking to students, getting everything moving, so I really appreciate that, and that went really well. And then finally, really quick, I worked at the open house resource fair at a little USG table on Sunday, and I got to talk to a bunch of prospective students about USG and what we do. And I had a lot of people really excited, wanting to come to UConn, wanting to get involved in student government immediately, so that was really cool. And that's all from me.
Okay. Are there any questions? I see there's one.
Love it.
Senator Hawkins.
Is there, I know you can't really speak entirely for Kyle, but is there a determined time of finishing the website and goal dates for when it'll be completed?
That I would not be sure of. Before the spring semester is what they're aiming for.
Thank you.
They're having coding issues.
All right. Are there any further questions? Nick?
Thank you.
Next, we'll move into the report of the Chief Justice. All right. We'll move into the report of the Comptroller.
So hi everyone. So kind of to briefly talk about what I've been up to so far. So on October 23rd, so last Monday I believe, at 6:30 in the SOC, we ended up hosting a town hall to discuss the SFAC, or the budget that we presented to SFAC. And we actually had a really good turnout, but the conversation ended up shifting more about the budget more to funding policies. So a lot of the acapella groups came in and kind of had issues with a certain part of our policy that discussed about recording studios. So essentially, the conclusion that came out of that town hall was that we would meet with each representative from the acapella groups and kind of discuss how we can move forward from that. So we talked to the staff, and hopefully that's something we can discuss in the next weeks and hopefully spring semester too. Another thing, so also another big thing is SFAC budget. So currently I'm working on a draft, and we'll be meeting with President Valverde to discuss kind of the changes that we're making. And then within next 2 weeks, I think our next Senate, which is right before Thanksgiving break, I'll present it to Senate, and hopefully you'll have some time, you will have some time before Senate to look over the budget and kind of see what changes you want to make. And then I'll also, Chief Justice Stern and I have been hearing a lot of appeals the past week. We actually heard an appeal yesterday regarding competitive soccer, and partially due to procedural error, and we ended up granting their appeal, which is really, really awesome. And then we'll also hopefully start the review of funding policies and kind of discussing what kind of changes we want to make, how we can minimize gray areas, and things like that.
Okay. Are there any questions for the Comptroller? Senator Hagan.
You said that we will be talking to the representatives of each of the non-color groups.
So we is essentially the incoming funding board chair, I, and our staff, and hopefully to discuss, because the issue with acapella groups has kind of been an ongoing process, and it's been going on for years, in terms of whether or not they're profiting off of the music that they record. So we're trying to find either way to make sure that we clarify the policies or kind of find that compromise. So hopefully that will happen. Right now we're hearing actually appeals throughout this week for the acapella groups, and then once those appeals are over, then we can decide how we want to go about this. So just more so like timing, kind of giving us our staff some time to look or to research more into the issue too.
Are there any further questions? Thank you. Next, we'll move to the report of the Vice President.
Hello again, everyone. So mine's just going to be a little bit repetitive, as Marissa talked a lot about what is going on currently with my VP duties. To start us off, LGO mentor and mentee forms are due tonight. I would just like to say, since everyone has their laptops out or has their cell Plus. A mentee form is if you have been in our organization for less than a year. This also includes people who maybe joined in the spring of 2015, oh my goodness, in the spring of 2017. So please fill out those forms. Take this time now during my report. I don't care if you don't listen to me. I'd rather you fill that out anyway. So please, please, please fill that out now. Other than that, as Marissa said, just working with Kaio and helping him if he needs any help with the website and working with Jillian on that. And other than that, my other big thing right now is VP is Apparel, which we are just now working on finalizing, and hopefully we'll have something to release to you guys to look at and kind of see, get a feel for by the end of this week. And lastly, the big thing is, as many of you know, because we went through some budget cuts at the end of last year, we're not having a fall banquet this year. However, we would be interested in having potentially like an end of semester membership event where we can all kind of, again, kind of celebrate the semester and celebrate each other and have a good time. So if anyone has any ideas for any membership events or anything that they would like to see, feel free to reach out to me. If you catch me in the office, that'd be great. Otherwise, feel free to email me. I'd love to hear whatever ideas you guys have. Otherwise, you're leaving it up to me and Marissa. So whatever you guys want to see. Other than that, that's it.
Are there any questions for the Vice President? Senator Higgins.
So at what point will the LCO program actually start?
Oh, okay. A very good question, actually. So we're hoping, again, the mentor-mentee forms to be filled out by midnight tonight. I keep stressing that. And so from there, Marissa and I are hoping to have assignments emailed to everyone. That includes like mentors being assigned, like finding out who their mentee will be, and mentees finding out who their mentor will be by Saturday at midnight. So kind of pretty quick turnaround. Marissa and I already have quite a few like big chunk of hours like set aside over the next 2 days to meet and make these assignments. We're really trying to like put a good amount of effort into this and make sure everyone gets like a good assignment and something that'll work and fit for them. So kind of trying to invest a good amount of time. So then everyone's looking at getting their assignment, and then we're holding the LGL kickoff event sometime before we leave for Thanksgiving break. The date is to be determined as the room availability is what we're waiting on to hear from there. But when you receive, we're hoping that when you receive your assignment, you'll also receive the details for when that event will be. Again, that will be required for all mentors and mentees to attend. If you don't attend, it will require like a valid excuse for not attending that kickoff event. But I will say we have something pretty cool planned. So yeah.
Okay. Are there any further questions? Senator Crowe.
This is a little blasé compared to everything else, but like, I don't know if you finalized it yet, or you can tell us, like, what attire we're looking at. It's gonna be like hoodies, it's gonna be shirts, what do you think?
I guess we can let everyone know it's kind of exciting. So we're looking at potentially items that will be for sale at reduced cost is LL Bean fleeces with the USG UCONN logo on them. And then we are also looking at a nice USG t-shirt that everyone will hopefully get. That way everyone will have, that way cost won't be a barrier for someone to have a piece of USG apparel. As we do ask you guys to like wear it to a lot of events. I know when student development has a lot of their events in the spring, it's really good to have that USG apparel so that people can find out who's working the event, who is USG, and ask those pertinent questions about that. So we're bringing down like a plain screen printed t-shirt kind of for that with some fun designs on it in my opinion. It was also brought up today, the idea of a 3/4 baseball sleeve, so I don't know how everyone feels about that. But that's kind of what we're looking at now, so.
Thank you.
Yep.
Senator Johnson.
Will there be a frocket on these t-shirts?
We could potentially do a frocket. We'll have to explore costs at that point.
Point of information, what is a frocket?
It's a front pocket. Okay. Such as this.
Okay. Are there any further questions?
How does everyone feel about a frocket? Well, good to know. Good frockets.
All right. Are there any further questions for the Vice President? Guys, we'll return to order. Are there any further questions? Okay, thank you. Next, we'll move into the report of the President.
Alrighty, so as Gabby stated, Metanoia is 1 week away. It went by pretty fast.
We had over 50 proposals with Stanford and Hartford and Avery Point all submitting proposals. One thing that we're going to be aiming to do is contacting the directors of campuses as well as deans of schools to make sure that it's pretty much promoted that these conversations should also be going on in the classroom. So even though we did have over 50 proposals and they'll be going on throughout the day, we really do want students to engage in these conversations in their classes. Another thing too is if you go on the together.uconn.edu website, all of the events are on there, and I really urge that everybody in USG bring a friend, go to these events. They're going to be really awesome. There's something literally throughout the whole day, so hopefully you can find something that you can fit in your schedule. Another thing, so luckily tonight we'll be nominating 2 more people for University Senate and for University Senate Committee, specifically Scholastic Standards. But we need someone for GEOC, and that's a General Education Committee. We really need somebody on that because they actually are looking at revising the general education requirements. So right now we don't have a student on that, and it would be really awesome if we could have somebody in there just to kind of talk about what students are looking for in general education requirements. If you're interested in that, please let me know. And there's still 1 more spot left for the Recreation Advisory Committee, and some really awesome news about that. So anybody who did apply and got nominated for that, Cindy Costanzo is going to be reaching out to you soon to plan meetings for this event this semester and for the beginning of next semester. And I spoke to her today about hopefully doing a presentation in front of Senate next semester to show the updates about what's going to be going inside the gym, even outside, what's been changing. So I'll talk to Speaker Tumum a little bit about that next semester to make sure that you all stay informed with that. As I mentioned before, the provost candidates are going to be visiting. I know President Herb sent out an email, but I really urge that everybody look at the dates. I sent it on the email I sent Sunday, like a whole list of the times and the places where they're going to be holding open forums. If you're unable to go to those open forums, let me know because I'm going to be meeting with them. I'm going to be meeting with all the candidates, so if you do have any questions but unfortunately can't make it to those things, just send them over to me. I would be glad to ask them those questions. But we do have Craig Kennedy from the University of Georgia, Sam Mukasa from the University of Minnesota, and then Chadin Jajali from the University of Iowa. So if you have any questions about the dates, feel free to go on that document that I sent over because everything is on there as well as the information for the library dean. Another thing too, I just want to make sure I got this right. So I sent out about 2 weeks ago now, like a letter of intent for the ad hoc committee for the governing documents. I only received 4 applications, and from my understanding, people kind of have been unhappy about the fact that it's not an open committee. So one thing I just really urge people is that if you have any questions or concerns about that, please talk to me about it, just because one of the biggest things that I've been talking about is making sure this committee can really stay focused and on track, because this all would have to be submitted by at least the end of February in order to get it to a referendum. So if you are interested in this but haven't applied yet, please feel free to do so. Like I said, I only received 4 applications, so if you do have any questions or concerns, just let me know. I'm hoping to have this up for discussion later, just because I know that someone is bringing up a subcommittee idea for the governing documents, but by our Constitution, it is that every 4 years an ad hoc is created for this. So I urge that you really look at that and take it seriously that our Constitution asks for it, and know that we are open to making sure that our meetings are open. It doesn't mean that nobody can come in. It's just a matter of having 7 people in a room who we can make sure are always coming and having everything prepared. And really the job for these 7 people is to make sure they're reaching out to you. So we would be talking at caucus and at Senate to hear your input, and just remember that you can always make amendments whenever you want, so you don't have to actually do anything through this committee. This committee is just kind of going to be like the steering committee to make sure that something gets produced and that we can put something up for referendum in the March election. So if you have any questions about that, please let me know. Some other things too, right now we're finishing up some documentation for the ex officio position for the Veterans Center. That's something that we passed last year, but still hasn't gone through the Board of Trustees. So we're just finishing up some documentation. You don't have to worry about whether or not Nate can actually be here. He's all good. It's just a matter of getting it through the Board of Trustees. Something else that I recently found out is last year,
Chairperson Hinton and Dan Bird, the past president, worked on getting more representation on Board of Trustee committees. And so I'm going to be talking to Joanne Lombardo about what exactly are those spots. The board has only met once, and their next meeting is in December, so my hope is that if we do have some spaces, that's something that will go up once again for you all to send letters of intent to, and that's really exciting to be able to serve on a committee with the Board of Trustees, staff, faculty, administration. So just look out for an email regarding that. If I get more information or if you end up finding anything, just let me know. And then just the last thing, which I think everyone's very curious about. So, oh wait, one more thing. If anyone is interested in going into a meeting with dining and Dining is having a meeting with a consulting group to review kind of dining services at UConn, and they're going to be helping them build a 4-year plan. So Dennis Pierce asked me to get 8 students to be on this. Right now I only have 2. So I'm opening this up to everybody. If you're interested, I can send you the information, and if it works in your schedule, it would be great to have as many students as we can in there, because the consulting group is going to be meeting with dining services, students, and then as well as the administrators to provide a plan. And this really does impact students, so I hope that some of you can attend. If you have questions, just come up to me afterwards. And then lastly, with funding board, so Jay has resigned. He resigned last Thursday, effective immediately. Due to, unfortunately, some mistakes on his part, he felt that it was best to step down. With that being said, so as you all know, funding is pretty crazy. Friday morning, it was already getting pretty intense without having a funding board chair for 2 hours. So I sat down with the staff and as well as with Vice President Johnson to figure out really what the best step moving forward was for students. And after also speaking with Jay, we all had felt that Richard Perret, who I think just stepped out right now, he actually is here today, just wanted to kind of see what Senate was like, that he would be serving as funding board chair pending Senate approval. For those of you who may have been interested in applying for the position, we did interview 3 people last semester, so we based it off that pool. Unfortunately, because of this kind of happening out of nowhere and it being a really busy time for funding, we don't really have the time to train someone for 3 months. So as you all know, all of the chairs get confirmed by Senate in April and then have really that entire summer to prepare for this semester. And so Jay had the entire summer to really prepare for this position. It's a huge undertaking. I don't even think I could really explain the amount of work that goes into that committee. But Richard hopefully will be presented at Senate. I really do urge all of you to get to know him. He's a really awesome guy. He's been on the committee for 2 years. He was actually Jay's vice chair as well. And Dawn and Daria, who are the staff members who work directly with the funding request, as well as the bookkeepers, have said nothing but great things about his requests, his ability to do them accurately as well as efficiently. So for the sake of students and for the sake of time, we thought this was the best decision. With that being said, we don't plan on confirming him, we don't plan on bringing him to Senate until the 15th, which is right before Thanksgiving break. And we thought that was important. That's Richard. Richard, you could just say hi. I'm just talking about you right now. So we're not planning to present him until then, just because we really do think that right now, in order to make sure we're keeping up to date with all of the requests, Lisette's been really kind of helping him get into the preparation of taking on that large role. And really, depending on who ends up being the funding board chair, hopefully Richard, that's when I would say Senator Barugo's question about, what's going to be the possibility of joining for next semester, those would be directed to the new funding board chair. Sorry, that was a lot, but that's what I have.
All right. Are there any questions for the president? Senator Murray.
Sure. Can you just explain a little bit more about when you were writing the executive order to establish the ad hoc committee, why you wanted to make it only 4 open seats to students and why you wanted to separate them by credit standing?
Yeah, so I thought it was really important to make sure we had one person from every single class, just because, you're a senior, so there's some of us who have been here for a few years and definitely have seen the pros and cons to our Constitution, but I also thought on the other spectrum that having someone who was a first-year member, or specifically a freshman, that was really crucial to also kind of provide a different insight, something something that was new, and when they were reading it for the first time, they could provide something that was unique in comparison to, in comparison to, let's say, me or you who have been here for a while and can kind of have a different perspective. I chose one from each one just because that would total 7 people in the committee, and considering with the amount of work that needs to be done, I felt that it was crucial for them to play a delegate role. I know that for some people they're interested in increasing that. That's something I'm open to, possibly doing 2 per each class, but I think really going above any more than 15, I get nervous about the productivity of the committee just because a lot of it does have to be done during Christmas break. So that's kind of why I wanted one from every single year, just to provide different insight. And I think that if we want to look at the numbers, I would be happy to change that.
Okay. We had a question from Senator Baxter.
What was the website that you stated for the events again?
Oh, together.uconn.edu.
Okay, and my second question is, so out of the 4 for each year, are all 4 of those already filled up?
No.
What years do you need still?
I actually haven't picked yet just because I've only had 4 applications. So I didn't want to pick, and I don't want to talk about those specifically because, I mean, the people that applied are phenomenal. But I just think that if there are people who are interested, or if there is an interest in the committee growing, I would put that as a priority and then be able to evaluate those applications.
Okay.
But unfortunately right now, they're actually, I think 2 of them are from the same year and the other 2 are from the same year.
Thanks. Okay, Senator Johnson.
So for the provost search committee and all that, for those 3 gentlemen, the schools, do you know like relative size as compared to smaller, larger? I mean, I could Google it, but
I think they're similar. And that was something that we considered when we were interviewing, making sure that they're at least near the same caliber as UConn, as well as the same size. But specifically for these gentlemen, they are all deans at their universities, and so we really also consider the size of, like, the scope of kind of what they have. So, you know, we wouldn't want a dean who only had 50 people under him, you know? So we were looking for people who have experience with large budget, a huge amount of staff and faculty that they work with. So those were all things that we considered when we brought these 3 candidates. But like I said, definitely, if you can go to the open forums, that's a great opportunity to talk about their past experiences and how their past universities can kind of play a role in how they'll be able to do things here at UConn.
Okay, Senator Rufino.
So for the committee, was that sent out to
Nope, that was sent out to everybody. The whole, or what do you mean, the ad hoc committee, the governing documents? No, that was sent to the listserv, like the entire USG listserv. So that has about like over 200 people. Yeah.
Senator Teal.
Yeah, I hope. Yeah, that would be great. Because like I said, I'm open to it. It's just also kind of like, I've only gotten 4 applications, so it's funny when people are like, everyone wants to join. And I'm like, who's everybody, you know? So. Yep. That's
I
great.
agree with that.
Perfect.
Okay, are there any further questions? Senator Burke.
Did the funding board have any input onto your selection of Richard as the chair?
Unfortunately, no, and I don't want to go too much into that because a lot of it kind of, unfortunately, I got an email telling me that funding board played a huge role in an investigation in this whole thing, so we didn't want any personal agendas or personal biases to impact that decision. So we went basically on, and I could talk to you more about that afterwards, it's just I can't I just want to respect Jay's privacy and just not talk about that right here. And really for anybody who's kind of feeling lost and wants more clarification, feel free to ask anybody on Exec. We all do know what's happening with this. But we really kind of wanted to avoid that and really just based it off of who would be next in line based off the fact that he was vice chair and as well as Dawn, Daria, and Lisette's recommendations. Lisette also was funding board chair last year, so she had a great relationship with Richard, and he reviewed all of their requests this summer and even last year during like the breaks and stuff like that. But obviously, talking to Richard, we could talk about that at the future Senate.
Okay, are there any, Senator Reynolds?
I don't know if you or Lisette but because of this, will the funding board be accepting new members because that obviously is a little bit
would be until the new chair is approved. My hope is that yes, I think there's 2 vacancies after if Richard does get approved, so there would be 2 spots, and I hope they would get filled. Yeah, so that's a great question.
Senator Murray again.
How does Exec plan to prevent further future misconduct from happening so that we don't have to go through this again?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. I wish I knew the answer perfectly to that. I know some people do kind of know what happened with that situation. I think the biggest thing is really the transparency part of it. Unfortunately, really there was no once we found out about the situation, we handled it as best as we could. But really, I don't know what the steps would be for that because I feel uncomfortable, asking for people's email access and asking personal things. I think really the best thing moving forward is if a situation like this happens, it's really for everybody in the room too. If you hear anything, say something. I think that I was kind of shocked when I found out that there were multiple things that were kind of adding up. And so I think really I encourage everybody, if they see something, to say something. That way we can act faster, because I do apologize if this puts not just USG in a bad place, but also student groups. I think a lot of people were nervous on Friday about the whole thing. So, to the best that I can, when I find out something, I'll do everything that I can, working with advisors, the staff, exec, to kind of figure out the solutions. But unfortunately, I don't know what precautionary measures we can really do besides getting into people's personal emails and stuff like that.
Okay, are there any further questions? Parliamentary Joe.
First of all, to make one comment, ask a question.
If you word it as a question.
If I word it as a question, okay. Let me try it. Would you agree with me when I state that as a person on the funding board, I believe that, I know that Richard is a great person for funding board. I'm trying to make that a comment, but I have to word it as a
I know where you're gonna go with this, and I think that this conversation should happen when his appointment is going through, because I don't want to talk too much necessarily about him or the application and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So
I'm just trying to say as a comment to say that as a person on the funding board, Richard is a great guy, and I definitely believe that he's more than capable to be funding for chair. I guess my question was, as a person on the funding board, I personally was never notified of a vice chair being chosen, so I was just wondering if you had any information on how Richard was chosen as vice chair.
yeah, Jay picked him just because they worked together all summer on summer requests, and I think also Jay knew that Richard was pretty much second in line, and he really wanted to facilitate leadership just in the committee in general, because in the past we've always had an issue of people not applying for funding just because it is so scary. So I think Jay, and Richard talked about this in 2 weeks, but really took Richard under his wing to kind of show him the ropes. And the vice chair decision, from my understanding, he decided that weeks ago. And I'm sorry if he didn't make that transparent, but unfortunately I can't really, speak on that.
But since that was not very transparent to the funding board people, moving, and technically since there were no letters of intent called for at that point, is that something that you would look favorably upon for moving forward to have letters? If I believe every single committee has letters of intent for a vice chair position, but funding board, to my knowledge, was the only one that didn't. And being someone on funding board, the first time I even heard of it, vice chair last week, we're at 10 of being, and I find that slightly alarming. So I was wondering if that was something that you would, what were your thoughts on having that be a thing to have letters of intent for vice chair?
So I think that's great. I think it does offer opportunity to a lot of people, which I urge, but at the same time, there is technically no procedure for that. So, and that's something definitely that the governing documents committee could look at. And so I do, like I said, apologize that that wasn't transparent on his end, but unfortunately I can't talk too much about it. But I think that is something that we could consider in the future about having a formal process for those things. And I think because of time, we really didn't think that interviews and calls for letters were the best move for the sake of making sure student groups get funded.
I didn't mean, sorry, like, I probably should have clarified. I didn't mean for, like, for planning board chair is meant for vice chair.
I think I'll yield my time to Evie Johnson.
Just saying, it shows, like, I know we've heard about a lot of, like, different committee chairs that do calls for letter of intent just based on the committee size, but there are also other committees in USG that have also not, like, the chair has chosen the vice chair. So, and that goes along with what the president already was saying, that, like, there's no outline or procedure on how that is supposed to happen. So, just so that we can have a frame of reference here.
Okay, so are there any further questions for the president? All right. Okay, now, it seems we have received the text of a report from the Academic Affairs Chair. With your unanimous consent, I'd like to move item D to underneath item L on the report's agenda list. Are there any objections to that motion? Seeing none, we'll move into the report of the Academic Affairs Chair.
Hi again. So Mama said that her advising surveys are ready for launch. The survey will be sent out November 9th with promotion going all week. Also, the first draft of the UCONN Academic Resource Map has been created, and the committee will spend this week and next week discussing ideas and revisions for the next draft release. Finally, conversations about care packages will begin within the next 2 weeks. And that's all.
Okay. I will not entertain questions because Chief of Staff Nazaro is not chairperson up yet, so it just doesn't make sense. Does anyone have any questions? That's it. Okay. Now we'll move into the report of the speaker. All right, so these past 2 weeks have been an eventful past 2 weeks for Senate. I apologize for the climate control here. We tried to get this place a little bit colder, but unfortunately maintenance says there's nothing they can do. So I apologize for that. So over the past 2 weeks, you know what we've done as a Senate. We had some interesting discussion in this room 2 weeks ago, but we believed we did not have quorum, and so we had a special Senate last week. I lost my voice and was unable to chair that, so shout out to Parliamentarian James. Another thing I've been working on is interviews for Deputy Speaker. A total of 7 candidates applied and were interviewed. The results of that will be coming next Senate session. I thought it fair to allow more time for a more thorough evaluation of the candidates. I think rushing to judgment would be unwise in this case. The candidates will also now be able to be notified significantly before the nominations are announced, which I think is also a positive. And from those conversations, from those interviews, I gained a lot of insight into things that we can do as a body to improve how we do business. And one of the things that I realized is that those 7 people are just 7 out of 55 senators, and you all must have some ideas as to how we can make our body a more effective collaborative one. If you have any ideas on how to do that, please email me at represent@usg.uconn.edu. It doesn't have to be anything formal, it doesn't have to be a whole email, it can be a bullet point, it can be a series of words, it can be a sentence. I'm fine. I just want your ideas and I want your input. So, with that said, I'd like to talk about a few things. The first thing is voting. You should only be abstaining on an item if you don't understand the item. If you disagree with an item, you should not vote to approve it. If you vote yay on an item, you have to get a 2/3 majority to amend or remove that item from our rolls. So it's much easier to deny an item now, have it come back the next week, and have a better, more constructive debate on it than it is to pass it this week and regret it next week. Additionally, you'll notice that our reports this session took much longer than they have in the past. And part of that is part of holding chairs and committees accountable. Like Senator Murray discussed, every committee is a Senate subcommittee. All chairs report to this body as a whole. And it's our job to make sure that we know what those committees are doing on a bi-weekly basis, and that we hold those chairs accountable to what we've agreed upon them to pursue. That's why when every committee creates its own subcommittee, they have to come back to the Senate for approval. Which brings me to my next point. You should all be attending committees. And if you are, you should be on the lookout for certain things. The first thing you should be on the lookout for is quorum. Every body in USG needs quorum, whether it's a committee, a standing committee, or a subcommittee. It needs quorum of its members to pass a valid vote. Otherwise, those votes are not valid, just like a vote without quorum in this body is invalid. These subcommittees all need minutes, and these minutes need to be filed in the minutes folder. The chair people should know where minutes are filed, and if they need help finding that information, they can talk to Nikki or office staff or myself. Finally, I'd like to talk about reports. So these reports, as they were done today, are how I would like to see them done in the future. This question and answer sort of process takes a while, but it's necessary. And it's also necessary in the nominations process. When we nominate people to steer subcommittees, we ought to take a deeper look into their qualifications and their intent with the post, because they are acting on your behalf as senators. Additionally, we approve hundreds of thousands of dollars to be spent by these committees. They are our proxy. And whoever chairs these committees sets the minutes, they set the agenda, they set the tone of that meeting, and you need to be able to trust that they're going to spend the money that we've allocated appropriately and efficiently. That roughly concludes my remarks. Are there any questions? Senator Hawkins.
How many members are in the body that you are chair of?
Our roster sits at 55 members. So currently there are 40 members in attendance. And we'll talk about this later, but there have been some updates on that carrot and stick policy. Senator Schroeder.
Can you speak a little more on when or how often the motion for the previous question is used?
Motions of previous question are powerful because they kill debate. They kill the opportunity for your fellow senators to make a comment on whatever is being discussed. That's why they require a 2/3 majority. And there's a reason that motions for the previous question should not be entertained frequently, because we should respect the opinions of our fellow senators. And to call a previous question without regard to their opinions or their input is frankly disrespectful. And we ought to limit calling for the previous question until we truly feel that an issue has been thoroughly covered. Are there any further questions?
How long is the reservation for?
So the reservation for this room goes until 9:30. I reduced the reservation time from 10:30 to 9:30 because our first few senates didn't take too long. But seeing as we're becoming a more inquisitive body, I will up that reservation once more to 10:30. Our caucus reservations go till 8:30.
How can you make sure that we're incentivizing and encouraging Senate members not just to come, but to stay, especially considering reports almost took an hour and a half? So just to make sure, because I
we hear Senate when it comes to discussion on agenda items and discussion as a general item. I think that reports for Exec are important in that Exec does a lot of the day-to-day work of this organization, and Senate only has a chance to get updated on what they're doing every 2 weeks. And if that takes an hour, so be it. I think that's a worthwhile usage of time. I think that in the future we could keep our questions, we could look at the agenda and make sure that questions we're going to ask aren't going to bleed into other discussion items to perhaps be more efficient with time. But I think that using a large amount of time for reports is not a bad thing at all. And that senators will have blocked off the time from 6:30 to 10:30 anyway. And they have made a commitment to be here. Are there any further questions? Senator Reynolds.
Are you considering any repercussions for any senators or members of
Yes, and I will discuss this in the potential, the discussion item, the first discussion item of the meeting. Senator Hinton.
Just more like nothing. What does the asterisk mean, the agenda?
Yes, so the asterisks are items that have not been approved by this body yet. Every item that does not have an asterisk next to it is an item that was on the approved agenda and was sent out with the initial agenda package. Now, or with the initial notice package. All the items with asterisks are items that were added later and require Senate's vote in order to confirm their place on the agenda. Are there any further questions? Senator Corolla. Okay. So we are still meeting. Every Senate session, every USG member is required to have sexual harassment training, and that requirement will be fulfilled at caucus next week. So please be there.
Is that in writing? Because I also heard that you brought up LGL kickoff and then also brought up a mock Senate. So is that official that the person definitely comes?
Yes. So the Title IX person has been arranged for, and the requirement is either bylaws or constitution? Bylaws. So we've got to do it. Any further questions? All right. Senator Kroll.
So will that hit us from participating in any event?
The Title IX officer has informed us that they'll be taking no more than an hour, so we'll be okay in terms of participation with men and women. Chairperson Fizzy.
So, senators are asked to development
Yes, but they do need that training at some point.
I need to clarify on that. Would you offer training where people are able to attend the training?
Yes, they do. So yeah, we'll put you in touch with the people that you need to be in touch with to get trained. Okay.
Is there any way that the Title IX would be reconsidered, seeing it as a USG event going on at the same time? Shouldn't like USG members be at that?
It is. It's 1 hour out of the day. USG members are not required to dress in any non-casual format, so we think that we should do it because there is a time limit given on when we can provide this training. So this training has to be provided at some point, and because of the way things have been over the past few weeks, this is our shot. Okay, any further questions? Point of personal privilege. Can we open the doors so that we can ventilate this place a little more?
Motion granted.
Okay, so we'll move into the first item of new business. A joint resolution regarding impending budget cuts to the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services in the 2017-18 academic year budget. Do we have a motion? Motion goes to Hawkins, second goes to Lima. Okay, we'll move into discussion. Who would like to start? Yes, of course. Is this legible?
Is this like good? Okay, so we wrote this legislation, me, Ben, and Josh helped a lot. I really gotta be thankful towards him. Last week, because I saw in a couple different news articles actually that there were impending cuts or possible cuts coming to the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services in the new budget. And just an update, because obviously the budget's been passed and it's gone through Dan Moy's desk. He did line item veto the restructuring, I think it was, and increase to a tax on hospitals. And in the budget itself, it actually mentioned that that tax increase, like the money gained from that, would be going towards the DMHAS. So I think that's important to note, especially seeing as there are impending cuts. So that just cuts out even more money that they could be getting. I mean, the legislation is pretty self-explanatory. I think that it resounds like it means a lot to me personally, and I think that it's an issue that affects everybody in here, or very nearly everyone in here, someone that you know. It's pretty short and sweet, so I don't think it's really necessary to go through line by line. But if anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer. So with my time to share.
Thank you. Senator Hawkins.
I have a few amendments. I'll entertain them now.
Okay, we'll entertain amendments one by one.
Sure. First clause, after university student government, you insert the words of the University of Connecticut, and it would be followed by at stores.
Is this amendment taken as friendly by the
Yes.
sponsor? Okay. Okay. Senator Hawkins.
I have another one. Same thing in the last clause. Inserting of the University of Connecticut at stores. Well, at
And
stores.
is this amendment taken as friendly by the sponsors? Is there any objection? Seeing none, it will be taken as friendly. I'll motion to amend the last of stores to at stores. Is this amendment taken as friendly? Senator.
So in the second to last clause on the first page, if you just want to put in superscript after if it has any slides, resource.
It's taken as friendly, I presume. Okay. And Senator Reynolds.
Friday, the last whereas clause, the space between the sound
Is the senator referring to above mentioned? Okay. I'm receiving information that it is in fact a word. Okay, Senator Hawkins.
The third clause, to capitalize the C in UCONN.
And I presume this amendment is taken as friendly. Okay. Senator Pleasant.
On the last page, the first last clause, this was on hours. Instead of veracity of emergency or discussion can be speak.
Is this amendment taken as friendly? Okay. All right. Is there any discussion on this item? Senator Schroeder. Yes.
I understand that, like, this is definitely an important bill, and it's definitely necessary to make sure that mental health services across the state of Connecticut are funded. But I do want to just make the point, I'm not saying for or against this, I just want to make the point that there have been budget cuts everywhere, especially at UCONN. So, in my opinion, saying that any budget cuts to UCONN mental health services or mental health services should be taken as, like, we should give our approval of them. I think that's overstating our financial obligation to represent the students as best we can. So I think that if we're going to oppose any sort of budget cuts to any part of UCONN, then I think we're not representing the students properly and saying we want everything to stay as it is, even though the entire state of Connecticut is going down.
Chairperson Ganther.
I think, is this on?
Check the switch.
Yeah, I think, who's at the I'll
Do you want this one?
No. I think Senator Schroeder's points are valid. However, I think it's important for us as students to define certain parts of the budget as the well-being of students. Mental health services are services that are crucial to the well-being of students at this university. I think there's a lack of dialogue pertaining to how bodily harm as well as mental harm are two of the same, and they must be seen as two of the same. There is a lot of taboo regarding services such as this, and because of that taboo, students that are going to need this are vulnerable students on this campus. So in terms of voting for this, I want you to take that in mind, and as members that are supposed to be representing such underrepresented groups and vulnerable groups, take that into account.
Senator Murray. Oh, I apologize. Senator Murray and Senator Von Olson, I will add you to the speakers list. Senator Johnson is first.
So I have a question for the co-sponsors of this bill. What is the dollar amount that's being cut to mental health services at the university? $7 billion. But that's being cut to the university mental health services, CMHS.
Reminder that questions must be directed through the chair.
My apologies, Mr. Chair. All right. This is weird now. So
Yes, it is.
So okay, I'm going to get back to you then. I'm going to go sit down.
Okay, and if you would like to ask a question, you might wish to raise a point of information. Point of information by Comptroller Senator. You asked me, and then it's a convoluted process.
So what services are
I'll delegate that question to Senator Mayor.
Okay, so in terms of UCONN specifically, I actually reached out to both the Department of Condition Services and UCONN Health, and neither of them actually got back to me about the direct cut from UCONN Health. However, as you can see in the legislation, actually, there was a flat 2.5% budget cut across the entire board for the MHAS, and that's on top of a cut last year, which involved 68 actual layoffs to the actual department. So the cuts themselves are happening basically everywhere. And if UCONN Health actually reached out back to me, got back to me about the exact numbers, which I'm not sure if they're able to do, but if they did, now you want to.
Okay, another point of information from Comptroller Senator.
So I guess what do we hope to gain from this legislation? I think this legislation is really awesome.
Comptroller Sidoni, I think that question would be better posed proposed as a discussion item. Would you like me to add you to the speakers list? Senator Murray, you have the floor.
Point of order.
Yes, Senator Carroll. Yes, they are 2 minutes.
Thank you. So I would just like to respond to a point that was made earlier. So while it is true that it would not be proper of us to go around and oppose every single budget cut, because of course some budget cuts do have to be made, I do think that as a body we are capable of making value judgments and saying that some parts of the budget are more important than others if that is something that we choose to do. I don't believe in slippery slopes, so I think that we do have the capability as rational thinking humans to put the brakes on ourselves when it is necessary, and I don't think we've hit that point yet. So we did establish precedents for this last week, so I think that it's definitely something that we should look favorably upon. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Senator Murray. Senator Von Wilson, you have the floor. So Senator Burns and Senator Demura, you are on the speakers.
I think I have more of a question.
Okay.
So is that a bit of information? Doesn't matter.
Go ahead. Okay. I mean, you have the floor now, so you.
Okay, so I'm sort of interested, does CMHS, is that funded through the university or is it connected with DMHAS?
So if you were to yield your time to Senator Mima, I would accept that yield. Do you do so?
I accept.
Or, okay.
Or you accept.
I accept.
Yes.
Go ahead, Senator Mima.
So I'm pretty certain that like the University of Connecticut itself and UConn Health and UConn Health are two entirely separate entities. So I don't think that they probably get one.
So is it safe to assume that the regular university budget cuts that we're facing, the 143 million or whatever the number is, will that directly affect CMHS, or is that protected by more like state government type things?
I once again would entertain a yield to Senator Mima.
Sure.
Okay.
I actually don't have an answer to that because before I reached out to UConn Health, they didn't actually get back to me seeing as this legislation was last week. But they have to get back.
Thank you.
Do you yield your time?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Comptroller Sedani.
So first I'd like to commend Senator Mima for writing his first legislation. I think that's really, really awesome. I'm also really proud to see the discussion of mental health. I think mental health is a topic that has a huge stigma around it, so I thank you so much for bringing that up. I think my question though is, so what do you hope to gain from this resolution in terms of like what would be the next steps after that? And I yield my time to Senator Mima.
Okay. The chair accepts that yield.
So I feel you actually said it pretty well yourself that this is a conversation we can have. And I think that with this legislation actually be passed through and have be like an official UConn stance from the students on the fact that mental health is a very important aspect of everyone's lives that needs to be discussed. I think that's a really good deep point into being able to have more mental health events and stuff like that that actually benefit us.
Do you yield your time back to you? Thank you. Senator Hawkins is next on the speakers list.
So first I would like to address the question on whether or not, we advocate for students, and then what are the limits to that, if, any budget cut could be construed as a disadvantage to UConn students, which is true, and there is a slippery slope argument, but I also do not think that is really relevant here. We can realize what we've gone too far. And when I was thinking why this was significant, why the University of Connecticut undergraduate student government at scores should write something about it, is because of these three things that I thought about. And it's quantity in terms of how many students are affected by this. It's a hard thing to quantify because it's generally a very personal thing. And personally, as just yourself, family members, I'll let you determine those limits yourself. But that should be considered. The other thing is severity, in terms of the significance of this. How bad would it be if cuts were made? Mental health illnesses, they suck. Me personally, I feel there's nothing worse than having the privilege of being alive and for whatever reason being unable to appreciate it. So I think that is very significant, and we should do what we can to defend that. And then imminence. This is very relevant to right now. And if you did not catch in the, I think, third to last clause, or the second to last, those two are sort of tied together. It says it leaves a window for cuts to happen within the next 2 years. So this is not something that's just a retroactive shaming. This is to let the people who make those decisions know in the future that we care, we're noticing, and we don't want that to happen. The other thing is we have to, when we advocate, we also want to advocate for things that require it, I guess. 5 seconds? Whew! Yeah, and so things are, mental illness, it's very everywhere, but also, I'm just going to keep going until you tell me to shut up. That's all right.
I'm going to have to.
Motion for an extension
Oh.
of Senator Hawkins' time.
So we can't apply the, okay. We'll entertain it.
For 2 minutes.
Well, we have to vote on that motion. Do we have a second for that motion? Okay, we have a lot of seconds. Oh gosh. Rogalski was first. All in favor of the motion to extend Senator Hawkins' speaking time by 2 minutes, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, please signify by saying nay. We should not have any abstentions because this is a procedural vote. Fantastic. Senator Hawkins, you have 2 more minutes.
All right, I won't use all 2, hopefully. We want to advocate for things that are most important. Generally, those are the things that legislatures do not care about. People vote for who's going to represent them in Hartford. They do not think about what they voted on in terms of mental health cuts. That's not something the legislatures really care about because that's not what voters are really determining whether or not they should keep someone on the list. So we have to do that for them. Someone has to say, look, while the voters aren't caring about this, it's not in their top 5 things that they care about. There are people who care about it. And then the last thing, in terms of whether or not it's funding beyond just what goes to Connecticut or UConn, students do, I'm a commuter senator, so people commute, they get treatment elsewhere. There is a thing called the summer break and winter break, spring break, etc. Treatment, people often get the treatment with their doctors back home rather than with UConn, just because they have a relationship. I yield the rest of my minute-ish back to the chair.
Thank you. Senator Burns, you're next to the speaker's list.
I think Senator Hawkins said everything that I wanted to say, so thank you for that, so I don't have to say it. But I think that it's really important that everyone vote aye on this, not just some of us, because I think UConn needs to make a strong statement in support specifically of this, because it affects all of us. And it might affect us in the future. So, especially those who are at risk of this kind of stuff, any mental health services, not just suicide, I think it's very important that we all vote aye.
Senator Burns, do you yield the rest?
I yield all the
time. Senator Demora, you're next on the speaker's list. Oh, it appears we have a point for a motion.
I would like to, as it seems in my opinion, we are French frying right now. I would like to
Okay. This
Point of
motion-
order.
Go ahead.
I believe that would be in the speaker's list rather than through cutting the speaker's list.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
To make a motion like that, don't you have to go to the end of the speaker's list?
I do not believe so. Unless Senator Hawkins has other information.
I don't have the book in front of me, but I'm fairly confident.
Okay. Senator Schroeder will add himself to the end of the speaker's list, and then make the motion, I presume. This motion must be put to a 2/3 vote. All in favor, and advise senators that there are currently 5 senators still on the speakers list. That's 10 more minutes of your time, 10 more minutes at least of discussion that your fellow senators have wanted to contribute. With that said, we will move into a vote on a motion to the previous question. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, please signify by saying nay.
Nay.
And in chair's opinion, the nays have it. The motion does not carry. Senator Nomura, you have the floor.
So I think it's a really great bill. May I suggest though that some type of whereas clause be added in terms of urging the administration to make sure that if the budget cuts that are proposed are serious mental health, it was said that we don't know the actual numbers, that we make sure that students that are currently receiving treatment, that those cuts don't affect the current treatment that they're receiving. So I yield my time to the chair.
Thank you. Senator Reynolds, you have the floor.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Senator Lima for the work he's put into this bill. I definitely would urge everyone here to vote yes on it. I'm glad to co-sponsor it. This is a concept and a topic that affects a lot of people here. Mental health and services at UConn is a very important and vital program that we have in place to make sure that students are well served. I will also say, beyond this, if we consider statements of position like this, it should be a statement of position that affects a wide range of people. So, doing things like this to address the budget, doing things like this to address mental services is good, and it's not a slippery slope per se, but there is a point where we can't list every single thing from the budget and have statement of positions over and over. It's kind of French frying at the next extent, if you will. So I definitely agree with this bill. I'll urge everyone here to support it, support things like this that affect a lot of students at UConn, but we should be more mindful in the future of doing things like this, whether they pertain to an expanse of students. I yield the time to the chair.
Thank you. Okay, just for reference, I'm going to be making hand signals. This is 1 minute. This is 10 seconds. This is 5 seconds. Are those agreeable upon head nods? Okay, great, fantastic. Senator Teeling, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very proud that my colleagues asked me to sponsor this bill. They reached out to me this week, I can't remember what day it was, asking for the budget document because I guess I have a reputation now of being a budget hawk. So thank you for that. I urge all my colleagues to support this. As I came last in our special Senate, I was harping on everybody that this 881-page document will have provisions that affect everybody deeply, and that in how it was rushed through, we should be critical about the cuts that are being made in this document, that it get a public vetting process. This is our opportunity to publicly vet this budget. This is something that affects all of our students, our constituents, and I urge all of my colleagues to please support this going forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Do you yield to Senator? Thank you. Senator Kleisel, you have the floor.
Okay, I'm not trying to crunch on anything, but also I think it's really important that we think about the research that's being done through mental health. I don't know if you guys know about like the Humphrey Clinic. It's like speech and language building, blah blah. It is like it's a training clinic for people who want to be clinicians and stuff. So like that's also an important thing to think about and make sure that we want to keep funding those type of programs.
Do you yield your time, Senator?
I yield my time.
Thank you. Senator Schroeder, you have the floor.
I would love to, because of seeing the last couple people speak on the issue in the same manner that was previously stated, I would again like to motion the previous question.
And thank you, Senator Hawkins. The motion for the previous question does require the floor, so I would have
wise advisement, there is one person currently on the speakers list after Senator Short. We'll now move into a vote on a motion for the previous question. This motion requires a 2/3 majority. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, please signify by saying nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it and the motion carries. We will now move into the previous question on a joint resolution on budget cuts to mental health services. All in favor of this legislation, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, please signify by saying nay. Any abstentions? Seeing none, or in the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, the motion carries. I'd like to add 2 nominations to the agenda by unanimous consent. The nomination of Natisha Chittagelu to the University Senate Scholastic Standards Committee, and the nomination of Sandhya Senapala to University Senate. Can I do these without discussion? Seeing none, it is so. We'll move into the nomination of Natisha Chittagelu for the University Senate Scholastic Standards Committee. Can we have the president please present the nominee?
So I'll be accepting on her behalf because she couldn't be here. But fortunately, she's actually the vice chair of academic affairs, and so she thought that it was really awesome because right now they're working on requirements for dual degrees as well as double majors. So I encourage Amma to find someone, and it's perfect because she's the vice chair of academic affairs.
Okay. Are there any questions about or discussion regarding the nominee? Senator Chin.
Mr. Speaker, could the executive kind of explain the process that she went through to vet candidates, somebody who has been new to the casting process, with quite qualifications set?
Yeah, that's great. So typically,
You go ahead, yes.
sorry, thank you. All right. That's a really great question. So I'm actually pretty simple with it. So typically when someone submits a letter of intent, I read over it, and if I have any questions, sometimes things don't make sense, or on accident people will send in like an application for the wrong thing, and I'll be like, hey, maybe are you interested in something else? But afterwards, if I just double check that the meeting times work with them and to make sure that they're going to be committed to it, but then afterwards I would just let them be able to be presented at Senate and get voted on. So really it's pretty simple as long as you send in the letter of intent. I don't really want like a 3-letter one, like a 3-page one, just because I want to be kind of considerate of people's time. So I'm fine as long as you can get your point across as to really why you want to serve on these committees and work on behalf of students. That's what's really crucial for me.
Senator Chilling, you mentioned you had 2 other questions. Okay. Are there any further questions or discussion, or are there any further questions? Seeing none, we'll move into discussion. Is there any discussion regarding the nomination? Seeing none, we'll move into a vote. All in favor of the nominee, all in favor of confirmation of the nominee, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All in opposition, please signify by saying nay. Any abstentions? In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it and the motion carries.
Thank you.
Next, we'll move into the nomination of Sandhya Senapala to University Senate. Can the president please present the nominee?
Yeah, so Sandhya is actually here, so I don't have to accept on her behalf. But I have never read a letter of intent that was just so excited to just serve students and be vocal. And I know as a freshman, I like you wrote in your letter, I think it's so important that that people don't step back because they're first-year students. I think that's even more amazing when first-year students are really trying to be vocal. So I think Sandhya will do a great job representing students at University Senate.
Can the nominee please stand? Are there any questions for the nominee? Senator Burns.
What are some of your plans?
Can you speak louder so that your fellow senators can?
What are some of your plans?
For those on the other side of the room, Senator Burns asked what Senator Senapala's plans are. Are there any further questions? Senator Higgin.
So is there any reason why you chose University Senate as a whole?
Senator Senatorial, would you like the mic?
So I was looking through the descriptions of all the senates that were sent out, and looking through University Senate, I thought that was the one that pertained most to my interests and how I felt about my position as a senator and also like as a committee member. So that's why I picked University Senate, and also the fact that it fit in with my schedule as well.
Are there any further questions for the nominee? Oh, Senator Schroeder, is that a question?
Could you speak more on, you mentioned during your Senate, kind of what you want to do, not exactly what you want to do, but you mentioned during your Senate term, can you speak a little more on that in regards to University Senate? I'm not sure.
Based on the description, based on the description of University Senate, I got a little bit of an understanding that it pertains to like the general body of UConn and upholding their values, and that's something that I strongly agree with, and that's something that I've always wanted to do, especially as a student at UConn and as a freshman, like showing that, you know, even first-year students can have their own say, and it's not only limited to just older upperclassmen, which I know I'm kind of putting myself in a weird position here, but so with that, that's why I wanted to join University Senate, because it's a place where you can uphold, where the values of UConn are upholded, and it's something that I wanted to do. So.
Are there any further questions? Seeing none, we'll move into discussion. Senator Senatorial, you may proceed.
Just so everybody knows, so with University Senate, they meet once a month, the first Monday of every month. And so typically what's being done there is updates. And so really the opportunity that students have on University Senate is to really hear what's going on and be vocal and talk about kind of what their opinions are, and also to bring back those things to USG. And that's why I think it's important to make sure every single student representative is filled, because if we don't have students there, then nobody's questioning and nobody's wondering about how things affect students. So I know people have been asking kind of like, what do you see your role and what is your plan? A lot of that really can't be set until you get to these meetings and hear what exactly is being talked about.
Is there any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, we'll move into a vote. All in favor in acceptance of the nomination, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, please signify by saying nay. Any abstentions? In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, the motion carries. Senator Gethel, or I'm sorry, Chairperson Gethel. Senator needs to make that motion. Is there a motion from Senator Chen? Go ahead. Okay, which item? I'll let Chairperson gather whether you have a few more. Okay. That motion is in order. The motion requires a speaker for and a speaker against, and a simple majority to pass. Now, are there any speakers for this motion? Chairperson Geller, you will have 2 minutes, and you may take the floor.
Is it work? Oh, here we go. I know that the Senate is going by really slowly, and a lot of us want to get out of here.
but I want us to all remember the reason why we're here. We're here to represent the needs of students, and I understand that this piece of legislation wasn't introduced in a timely fashion. However, that's not always how the interworkings of the university work. This item was brought to me last night, and I had my meetings literally 2 hours before I got here. I wouldn't have been frantically writing this legislation with the senator over here if this wasn't something that was important to the UConn community. This is specifically addressing a community on campus that has been vulnerable in many instances and identifies as being vulnerable in this situation. And as this body, it's our responsibility to address that in a timely fashion. And I believe that introducing this legislation today is very in order.
Is there a speaker against? Senator Hagan.
So while I'm not in opposition to the bill at all, or even to really discussing the bill tonight due to our own personal time constraints, I would more like to voice concern about construction of the bill, how it was constructed within 2 hours, and I don't know whether it would be prepared to actually present at Senate tonight. Whether it would be, we just discuss it and then see that there would need to be recommendations made over the coming week. Also, as a student services committee member, though I understand that, of course, this was a last minute thing and this is a very, very timely topic, or a time-sensitive topic, I still would like to discuss it within committee and see more about the background of it from the more about the background of it and more about the actual details of creating the bill, rather than seeing it in its final stages just a few hours after it's actually written.
Okay. Is there another speaker for? Is there another speaker against? The chair will entertain a maximum of 2 speakers on each side. Senator Hawkins.
A request for information.
Yes.
That's all right. I don't know if this was answered. I'm sorry if I missed it. Is there a reason that we should vote on it tonight rather than 2 weeks from now?
I think Chairperson Gatheru tried to answer that in her speaker 4 comments, and it's up to the body to decide whether or not that is a valid item to be voted on tonight as opposed to our next Senate session. Senator Schroeder, were you a speaker against?
I was just going to ask for information on whether if there was some meeting that was coming up to that this had to be presented to the schools having.
Okay, so I'll direct that point of information towards Chairperson Gatheru. Was there a meeting at which, a USG meeting at which this item was discussed, or was it a meeting?
My question is there some meeting by the university or some other body that this legislation should be passed before that meeting happens?
So I'll yield to Chairperson Gatheru.
So that's the entire intention of this legislation. There were decisions made about the involvement of undergraduate.
Point of information, can you speak up?
Sorry.
If you want.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I just blanked.
Senator Schroeder.
The question is there a meeting
Oh,
that
okay.
is going to occur?
So the whole intention of this legislation is so that there will be a meeting with the involvement of undergraduate international students. So I know somebody had said earlier, it's like this document going to be accurate given the time constraint. We were guided by legislation that had been created on the behalf of the graduate student government that was passed, and through the passage of that legislation, they were able to have conversations with the administration where their situation in regards to the visa was altered. We want to see a similar alteration, or at least the ability to have dialogue pertaining to that involving undergraduate international students. That makes sense. So we want a meeting. And it's the end of the semester, so it's very timely.
So I'd like to reiterate Senator Hawkins' point of information. Why does this item need to be discussed tonight? And yield to you as opposed to 2 weeks from now.
In continuation of that, I personally will not be here in 2 weeks. I will be in Germany
along with Senator Hawkins at the UN climate change talks. So personally, I would like to be here for that, and also in terms of the continued work that would be done if this was to be passed. It's the end of the semester. People are busy. Things need to be done now.
Are there any other points or motions on the floor?
Point of personal privilege, do you have a copy of the bill or anything that we read?
So the entire intent of notice and providing an agenda and legislation beforehand is so that senators have appropriate time to review. The reason it's so difficult to add an item to the agenda is because senators will not have had the time to review the situation, review the bill, and consider possible amendments. And that's part of what you have to consider when you're faced with this vote. Does that address your question, Senator? Okay. Senator Snow. So I'll take this point of information. We reserve special senates for situations where there is a truly time-critical item. Last Senate, you dealt with a series of nominations, a slate of nominations, and if those nominations were not passed, members of USG who are appointed to committees would not have voting rights within those committees, which we consider to be an issue. And that's why the special senate was declared. We do not want to make the declaration of a special senate a normal occurrence by any means. The next senate is scheduled to occur in 2 weeks. Does that answer your question, Senators? Senator Burns.
So, just be clear, so we can't do this before voting on the agenda?
We don't have this item right now. That's a fair concern. Senator, our Chairperson Gather, do you have the text of this legislation? Can you send it to Representative USG? Thank you. Okay, so you are going to, that's another thing, is that we do not have the text of this, and after I get it, it's going to take time for all of you to get it. That's one of the things you have to consider with this vote. I return to my call for a speaker against. Senator Schroeder.
So I'm not opposed to the bill, although I don't know the information that is in the bill. I feel like it isn't something that should be brought up and should be talked about. But I am against adding it to the current agenda without any information on it currently, with it being written in a short period of time. And no, in my opinion, no real time sensitive reason to add it this Senate. Yes, it is nearing the end of the semester, but in my opinion, I am not sure that is enough reason to add it to the agenda now instead of having ample time to look at it and figure out, do I agree with this, or are there any amendments that I would like to make? And just because it's at the end of the semester, I don't think that should change anything about the way the bill is presented and what the bill should do.
Yes, Senator Carroll.
Aren't these fees included on the fee bills when we send out?
Point of order, to make a question.
Yes. Senator Murray, is that a point or a motion?
It's a motion.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to recess for 5 minutes so that we can get the text in front of us.
Okay. Okay, so I'm receiving information. Okay. It looks like we have the legislation here. Senator Murray, I'm going to rule that motion not in order at this time because we do have the full text right in front of us. The question to be asked is if that changes anything. I'm going to ask again for a speaker for Senator Hawkins.
I move for a 5-minute recess so we have time to review this.
Okay. Keep in mind, Senator Hawkins, that we have not yet agreed to add this item to the agenda. We must agree first if we think this item should be added to the agenda tonight. Is there a speaker for? Is there a speaker again? Speaker for?
I was trying to make sure I was right about this before I said anything. So I think that this is time sensitive just because of the fact that this visa compliance fee is actually semesterly. So it's not just like a one-time during the year. So the next time the fee bill goes out is actually pretty soon. I think you're correct, Senator Carroll. I mean, if you do it like a monthly plan, it actually starts in like 3 weeks, and if you're doing the full thing, it's in January. Like Chairperson Gallagher said, there aren't many more weeks left, and I try and schedule meetings with people, and it takes at least 2 weeks to try and schedule something. So I think this would help her a lot to make sure that in these meetings, it's a holistic, everybody's supporting this. It can definitely help in getting these meetings for her. I'd be happy to help, but I do think this plays a huge role in making sure that the administration, as well as other people that are going to be involved in these discussions, like the bursar's office, as well as global affairs, something like this would really, really help to make sure that something is done before that. So I do think it is time sensitive, because the next time we meet is November 15th, and nobody's going to set up a meeting the day before Thanksgiving break.
Speaker against. Or, I'm sorry, is that a point of motion from?
Point of personal privilege, can you please speak up?
Sorry, I have some background.
Sorry.
So just want you to know that it's not like a tiny little.
Senator,
I just want people to know this is not like a tiny little like $15 fee. This is like a $350 per semester fee. So just thinking of like yourself, like if you had paid extra $350 just because you're an international student, I think that's unfair. My sorority is international students, my roommates are international students, and they have voiced their concern to me a lot, knowing that in USG that this is something that they do not think is fair. So I think that this is something to
Senator McHugh, in the future, this point is better made in a speaker for or speaker against setting, and not as a point on its own. But,
Yeah, I was confused. I thought that was being called on for speaker for.
we alternate speaker for and speaker against.
Okay, makes sense.
So we just got a speaker for. Is there a speaker against? Senator Regina.
Thank you, Senators, for bringing this up for us to look at. I understand that this is time sensitive, but for the most part, all of our bills have been that in the past of this semester. And also, if this is a semesterly occurrence that has to be adjusted this semester, then we probably should have, well, I don't want to talk about that, but in the future, I urge senators to plan ahead for things like that, because it can help prevent like situations like this. And I think adding this to the agenda right now will just set that precedent for the rest of the year and just for the future. So I'm against. Thank you.
Point of information, the legislation has been added to the same agenda folder that was sent to you during notice, if you'd like to see it. Is there a speaker for? Is there a speaker? Or is that a speaker for?
Yes.
I would just like to make sure that the body is aware that the agenda of a meeting is not intended to tie the hands of the body. If we believe that something should be added to the agenda, the hurdle for adding it is built into the 2/3 majority required to pass it. We don't really need to self-impose a more harsh restriction than that on ourselves. So I don't think it sets any bad precedent. I think adding it to the agenda, as long as we get a 2/3 majority, is perfectly within the scope of the rules, and definitely something that we should encourage ourselves to do if we find it proper to do so. Which I do with this bill. I yield my time.
Thank you. Is there a speaker against? Senator Hawkins raised his placard.
I move to the previous question.
I'm going to entertain the speaker against Senator Crow. The previous question here, we'll entertain that motion at a later time. I'd like to keep the scale down. Senator Crow, you
Alright, so I'm going to make this short and sweet because a lot of what I wanted to say has already been said. But as many of you might remember, at the first meeting of this year, when we considered the resolution for the budget, I came up here, it was my first meeting ever, and I brought a bunch of amendments to the bill. And while it was a good idea, a lot of senators informed me it was a good idea in practice, a lot of them voted against it because of the fact that they did not have enough time to consider it. And there is a reason that that was the case. And it's not just because, it's not that this isn't a good idea and that it shouldn't be dealt with here. But if you hear stuff out, we may actually hear more stuff that helps this bill get better, that makes it so in the future it's more fleshed out and more like it improves it. It's not just amended. By looking at it more, it's not just saying that, people may come up with problems with it. There could be improvements that come from this. I understand that it's we need to work in a timely fashion sometimes. But, not for nothing, but democracy is methodical and slow for a reason. We need time to consider these things and improve upon them. And so I stand with the rest of the audience when I say not to add it for the agenda. Thank you. I know you have my time.
Thank you, Senator. There have been equal numbers of speakers for and against the motion for the previous question. Would be in order at this time if Senator Hawkins chooses to make it.
Sure.
Okay. We'll entertain the motion for the previous question. This motion requires a 2/3 majority. We are voting for the motion for the previous question on the motion to amend our agenda by adding this item to the agenda. Is everyone clear on what we're voting on? Great. This vote is for the motion for the previous question. All in favor of the motion for the previous question, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please signify by saying nay.
Nay.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it and the motion carries. We will now proceed into voting on the motion itself, the motion to amend our current agenda by adding a joint resolution regarding the international student visa compliance fee. This motion requires a 2/3 majority. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please signify by saying nay.
Nay.
Can someone call division? Okay, thank you. If you, all those in favor, please raise your placards. Okay. There are 17 in favor. All those opposed, please raise your placard. Any abstentions? I abstain because of the chair. Okay. So, Senator Hawkins.
I'm abstaining.
Oh, okay. Well. Yeah. So, this motion does not carry. In a vote of 17 to 10 to 2, a 2/3 majority was not achieved. The next item on our agenda is discussion. We will discuss penalties for misconduct. I'd like to recognize myself. We have 2 minutes starting at 8:51. Okay, so I reviewed the bylaws once again, and I came across a clause that allows Senate leadership to strip a member of this body of their voting rights if they don't meet the member responsibilities. This means that By a 2/3 vote, Senate leadership can expel any member of this body from this body. Now, question is, I'm putting the question to you. Do you want us to start doing this for people who have not shown up for a long time? I think the only people qualified to make that decision are other members of this body. I want to hear your thoughts. I'll give my time to the chair.
So, I think Schroeder was first, and then I get everyone down.
I do understand the reason why this clause is in the bylaws, and I just want people to be aware. I'm for it. I think that if someone doesn't show up to what they decided to be represented for, then they should no longer be that represented. But I think we should take into consideration how long they have been absent and have the absences been excused or unexcused. So, because you're removing a representative that was elected by people, by the constituents of a certain group, it should be a reasonably long time before they are removed from office. I don't have an exact answer on how long reasonably long time is, but I think that can be figured out in further discussions.
Thank you. Senator Baxter, you have the floor.
All right, so for those of you who don't know, I'm an ex officio senator. I come here every single meeting, but I can't vote, I can't motion. The only real thing I can do is speak, and typically you guys don't hear me speak. I just chit-chat with people in the corner and I influence them. You guys usually hear that because I'm not very quiet when I whisper. So my opinion is, yes, we should do this. I'm utterly against people being on this to represent the students here, but yet they don't show up. And for me, in the Army, that's malingering. That's punishable. You get kicked out of the military for that. I'm a sergeant in Connecticut National Guard. I am not a strong advocate of people saying, hey, I'm going to show up and do something and never attend. Give my time to the speaker.
Thank you. Senator Hagan, you have the floor.
So I'm also in favor of there being a method by which senators should be removed if they don't fulfill their duties. I do want to raise a couple of ideas though. First of all, I don't know whether it should be done by time or whether it should be done by, say, amount of senates missed. So say if someone decides to come in every 2 senates, so once every month just to fulfill the basic minimum for how many senates they need to attend, how much time can be in between each senate. I feel like that would be an abuse of something like, something like a time limit between their participation. So I'd say maybe we should put a limit to how many senates per semester a senator misses. So say like if there are, I don't know exactly how many senates there are per semester, this is my first semester, but say there are maybe seven per semester. So say like if someone misses the majority of senates unexcused, I'm saying unexcused absences, then I think that they should probably be considered for removal. And then there's also the question of how heavily do we weigh committee attendance and other senatorial duties if they're holding their hours, because there's more to senatorial duties than just attending Senate. And I yield the rest of my time to the chair.
Thank you. Senator Boutino, you have the floor. I must also warn against French frying.
I'd like to actually share a question regarding procedure of so specifically with the process included in this country now, or just extended the question?
So the process involves a 2/3 vote of Senate leadership. So presumably, that motion would be discussed during Senate leadership meetings. An additional way we could do it is have votes of no confidence held in a senator. That requires a 2/3 majority of this body.
Got it.
Senator Gomez.
You have the floor.
So I'm for this, and I just want to say one of my friends was in this, wants to quit. So get rid of him, He's like that.
If I may, if you know senators who would like to quit, just have them email me saying they'd like to resign.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator Gomez. Senator Reynolds, you have the floor.
So I definitely have to agree with a lot that has been said. I should stress that removing a senator or having a vote of no confidence against someone in this body should be taken very seriously. So I think we should have procedural measures if we go this route, having hearings, sitting down with the actual senators and saying, what's the issue? Why are you coming? And setting standards that don't incentivize chronic absenteeism. Saying maybe if you miss a certain amount of meetings, then we're going to have a hearing. But I don't think it isn't fair to, first of all, the people that show up here, that do the work of their constituents, and their constituents themselves, that they aren't putting in the time. They ran, but they're not putting in the time, the effort, or the work, to serve their constituents, to serve this university. So I definitely support this, but I will stress that it's important to make sure that it's taken seriously and that there's several measures put in place to handle this. I yield to the chair.
Thank you. Senator Crow, you have the floor.
Okay, so on this one, I'm surprisingly going to go against the grain here and say I don't support it. And that sounds like, I understand the visceral reaction, and I'm absolutely behind you on all of that. We are here, we're putting in our time, other people are not doing the same. That's insulting. That being said, I believe where this comes from is the United States, the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States has the same procedure. It is I'm a student of history. In the history of the United States and the House of Representatives, 20 members have been expelled. 17 of those were for supporting the Confederacy, and the other 3 were on charges of corruption. This is something very serious, all right? I'm getting all red and fleshy, I know. But this is something very serious. I don't think this body has the power to strip elected representatives of their voting privileges because they are not attending. If that is a problem that should be addressed with their constituency. Their constituents should know that their representative is not showing up, and they should vote them out of office. And if that's becoming a problem, their constituents are so detached that they don't know those simple facts, then that's a problem, a completely different problem that we need to have a conversation about. But while this is important, I don't feel this body has that kind of jurisdiction. Thank you. And I yield my time to the chair.
Thank you, Senator Crow. Senator Johnson, you have the floor. Yes, Senator Carroll. So I'm going to answer the 2 parts of that question. The first one is to whether or not we're going to enforce measures that were previously approved. Yes, that is the question. I personally have been against stripping senators of their voting rights, but recognize that something needs to be done. I don't think I can make that decision on my own, and that's why I'm asking this body. Now, the next part of that is whether or not we can amend those rules. and we can. With a 2/3 majority vote, we can amend any part of the bylaws effective immediately. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Fantastic. So you're not allowed to have more than 2 unexcused absences to Senate without a vote of the executive committee to approve those. You are not allowed to have more than 2 unexcused absences to either office hours or your committee. Those are the requirements. Among the other requirements, like making sure that your constituents are aware of USG positions and a lot more less verifiable things. Does that answer your question? Fantastic. Senator Johnson, you have the floor.
Cool. So I'd like to echo Nathan's sentiments. Yeah, we don't have a voting right, but we still show up and participate in discussion, which I think is really crucial and cool. I don't want voting rights because I'd have to leave Concord. So I'm not asking for that at all, even though Nate wants it. Okay. But I would suggest to Senator Crow, we should have the rights to strip senators of their voting rights because by them not showing up, they're stripping their constituents of the right of representation. And that's what I think is really abhorrent by not showing up.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. Senator Thacker, you have the floor. Senator Schroeder, Bailey, or Crow, and Burns, would you like to be added to the speakers list? Okay.
So I definitely agree that senators should be accountable for their attendance, but they are elected, and I think that when we're putting these penalties to place, we have to realize that when we lose a senator, we lose a voice for the constituents. So maybe we can decide to have some senators take their place, some new people on board. I know we don't have another set of elections until March, but we're just losing senators at that point, and again, we're just losing their voice to express their opinions from their constituents. So.
Point of information.
Yes.
Is there anything in the existing bylaws that deals with what happens if a senator is removed from office? Is there a special election held that will replace them?
Undergraduate student government reserves the right to hold special elections, but a special election is not triggered at all by the absence of a senator or the senators from their seat. Okay. All right. So I really like what you guys are bringing to the table, and I think that Senator Thacker really brought up that last bit that I'm concerned about. While those senators do add to quorum requirements, they are voices that were elected on this to be in this body, and by stripping them of their vote, by stripping them of their membership in this body, we are stripping constituents of a voice in this body. So that is the other half of the equation to weigh. I yield my time to the chair. Chairperson Hinton, you have the floor. Senator Hinton, you have the floor.
So I agree with a lot of people. I think that it's really important to be here. So I understand the frustration of people not being here, but I do think it's a little harsh to take people out. So I was actually wondering, pose this as a question to the speaker, if there's any sort of thing we have in place for possibly losing speaking rights. I know in our state rules for external, that's something if you're not attending meetings regularly, and in my opinion, that's a more unreasonable kind of punishment. I yield the time to the chair.
Thank you, and I will use the remainder of Senator Hinton's time to address the point. The point brought forward is that there may be some other penalty. Loss of speaking rights is effectively loss of voice, and that's not something I can do unilaterally. I can not call on someone, but it doesn't really make sense to do that. If someone's here and they're going to vote, they should be able to explain their reasons as to why they're voting in a particular manner. I also don't think we should strip voting rights either. If we remove membership, we should do it the whole way and not sort of strip speaking rights where people can vote but not voice why they're voting. I'll yield my time back to the speaker. Senator Fazina has the floor.
Hi, everyone. I think that if people are missing Senate and caucus, and they're losing the voice for their constituents, because if they're not there, they're not giving a voice to the people who voted for them. And also, I know that not everyone knows how other student government works at other universities, but I had first-hand experience at a different school last year, and if they had a strict policy that if you missed 2 senates, then you would be you couldn't be there, but you wouldn't be on Senate anymore. So.
Senator Fazina, do you yield the floor?
Yes.
Senator Schroeder, you have the floor.
I want to voice my concerns that were brought up earlier about how if we do decide to remove someone, then we are removing the voice of the constituents that voted that person into student government. It's a very serious matter that we should not take lightly, that you're removing, depending on the group, maybe the only voice that they have currently in the Senate for the people to bring to Senate any ideas or concerns that they have. So this should not be something that's taken lightly at all. And I think that it should be a choice made by the entire student government. That if we notice that there's someone not attending for several meetings, or for whatever length of time or whatever requirements are deemed appropriate to discuss this matter, I think it should be brought up and voted on as an entire group because it is such a serious matter. But if the person is not showing up to the Senate meetings anyways, the constituents have effectively already lost their voice. They do not have someone who is representing them or the group that the amount of people that are represented at UCONN. They have someone who decided, I'm going to run, but I don't actually care about the constituents that I'm running for.
Thank you, Senator Schroeder. Senator B. Crow. I can't hear you. Okay. Thank you, Senator Crow. Senator Burns, you have the floor. Also, I'd like to take it aside to commend Senator Crow. He realized that his points were already said and avoided. Senator Burns.
So specifically, I disagree with loss of voting rights office hours. I know a lot of senators that are good senators have not come to office hours, so they'd probably already be kicked out anyway. So I think that should probably be changed, maybe on a lower level, because I think attending Senate is very important. Maybe not so much office hours, because I've gone to every single one of my office hours, and despite people saying, hey, they want to come and stay, talk, or do something like that, no one's ever come. So it's important, but at the same time, I think attending Senate is more important. So there should be a tiered system or something like that. And definitely attending committee meetings is more important than senators, in my opinion. And I yield my time.
Thank you, Senator Burns. Senator Reynolds, you have the floor.
I just want to make this real quick. I think we definitely should, I want to expand upon myself, make sure that this. I definitely think we should make sure that if there's a problem with a senator, that it's addressed thoroughly. I think if we need to consider bringing the judiciary in to handle cases like that, rather than us as a body, so there's some sort of separation, I think that would be a good idea. I also think we should, if there is any senators that chronically don't show up or don't participate, don't come to committee meetings, don't go to office hours, that either the speaker or someone in USG should meet with them to see what the issue is, so that we can go about this productively instead of just saying, you know, you're not coming, we're going to kick you out, problem solved. I think that should be an effective way of going about this. I yield to the chair.
Thank you, Senator Robbins. Chairperson Guthrie, you have the floor.
So the big theme today has been accountability and holding, specifically when we're talking about the issue with Exec, holding Exec accountable. Senators also need to be held accountable. And unfortunately, I think we're all pretending as though our constituents are completely in the loop of what happens here. I know if I wasn't a senator, I wouldn't have time to look at the minutes to see exactly what's going on. They vote for you because they trust you. And sometimes they don't have the privilege to know exactly what's going on with you, but we know what's going on with you. There are senators on this senator list that have not come to one Senate meeting this year. Does anyone know that?
Yeah.
I have a friend who studied abroad. She's going, she's in France, but she's representing CLAS, right? So does that make sense? No, it doesn't. So we need to hold each other accountable. In addition, this also affects quorum. If we don't have enough people in here, we can't vote on anything. Like, our groups are trying to represent people, and what are we doing if we're not voting on anything? Yeah, and some people were voted in by one person or wrote in themselves, so representing who?
Senator Murray, you have the floor.
So first I would like to thank Chairperson Gatherer about making the point about quorum, because I thought it was going to get all the way to me before we brought that up. We've had problems with quorum as recently as last Senate, where we couldn't vote on something because we didn't have quorum. At the special Senate, we were one person leaving away from not being able to vote for the second week in a row. That's a really big problem, because if we don't have quorum, no students have a voice. I would also like to just remind everyone that we're not really, as far as I know, at least unless the chair decides otherwise, we're not voting on anything right now. We're not changing the bylaws right now. We're simply recommending the Senate leadership how they should interpret and enforce the rules that are already there. So I think that means that we don't really have to necessarily say what's good or bad as much, but we can kind of look for a middle ground. So senators that haven't showed up at all obviously should be removed. Senators who have just missed their second Senate, well, that's up to the discretion of the chair, and maybe the chair and Senate leadership would like to meet with them first before expelling them or requesting the resignation or anything like that. But he is a person who has his own opinions, and he can kind of take these things into account. I think once you're starting to miss a lot of things, it does become a problem, where you're interfering with the body's business as a whole through quorum, as well as not representing your constituents. And I would also like to say that it's not particularly hard to get excused, as long as you notify him with a semi-valid excuse beforehand. You can get excused, and you're only expelled with unexcused absences. So it really takes a minimum of effort to not get into that list. And then I would like to close with a point of information to the speaker. If you were to enact the laws as they were right now, how many senators would be expelled, and roughly how many, if you were to go after this today, take our considerations and just expel maybe senators who haven't showed up at all, about how many do you think that would encompass?
I think that anywhere from 3 to 5 senators would be expelled for not having attended a single meeting, and up to 10 senators would be expelled for not having attended 2 consecutive meetings within a Senate. I'll wait until I have speaking time to clarify or expound upon what you just said. For now, parliamentarian Jane. Fantastic. All right, and that leaves me. Okay. So, the way I would go about doing this is the following. There are senators who I would interpret the policies in this way. I would not consider office hours as an expellable offense. I would consider committee attendance and Senate attendance, primarily Senate attendance, as an expellable offense. The primary objective of this would be to ensure that we are not counting members who will never show up in quorum. That's my objective with enforcement of this policy. So I would go about it this way. If you have missed 2 consecutive Senate sessions without notifying me prior to, I will send you an email asking why. And if there is not a sufficient reason or a commitment is not made to attend the next Senate, I will recommend it to Senate leadership that said member be expelled from this body. I will also share the results of that proceeding with you during my report every other week. Let me know if this is amenable. Senator Seifert, is that a point?
Yeah, just a point of information for you personally. Would you be kind of implementing this as a retroactive decision, like starting at the beginning of this body meeting this year, or would there be a point in time where you implement it, say,
I would implement it from here on out. So as of this Senate, if there was a member who was not in attendance for the past 2 Senates, they would receive an email. And the next time Senate leadership meets, next Tuesday, we would deliberate it if a commitment was not made by the senator in question, or a valid excuse was not given. Does that answer Senator Seifert's point? Thank you. Senator DeMore, is that a point or?
Point of information. Okay. Is there any type of document, or is there someone who is actively tracking senators' attendance at committee meetings or Senate in general?
So the minutes for every committee contain the attendance. And every senator is assigned to a committee, so we need to only look at those minutes. Currently, we don't have a unified list of committee attendance for senators, which is why I would base my initial decisions off of Senate attendance and Senate attendance only. Does that answer Senator DeRosa's point? Yes, Senator Lee.
I have a question, a couple of questions.
Okay.
One is that if a senator is expelled, what happens next? Someone's gonna take their place, and what's the procedure to that? And second question is that this happened the last Senate. We had one of the senators, he had work left around 8:30, and then I remember we took attendance and he wasn't here, and we lost our voting rights. But besides the voting rights, it's like he was affected in a way that it showed that he was here, it was just not early. So what's the procedure?
So attendance policies are interesting. If we were to follow Robert's Rules by the book, we would take votes, or we would take complete roll call attendance before every vote and lock the doors during every vote. But we don't do that. One, because it would be quite an ordeal to imprison 55 people in this room for the duration of one of our votes, and also because we don't want to waste 20% of our meetings taking attendance. Therefore, I track people who leave, get up and leave, and people who come in halfway through the meeting. It's done for your convenience, so you don't have to sit through roll calls. The first point you made, with regards to what happens when a senator is expelled, nothing. The seat is left vacant until the next election, at which point it can be filled. And a special election can be called if we think that's necessary. Okay, so I'll yield my time to the chair. Next on the speaking list is Chairperson Fazina.
Hello. Okay, so in the Constitution under Article 16, it says, any senator with unexcused absences shall be notified in writing by any member of the Senate leadership. Senators who are absent unexcused for 2 or more undergraduate student Senate meetings per academic semester. It also says this in the bylaws, so according to the rules, we can't start counting now, it's counting the academic semester. So people not showing up, it also impacts like committee attendance. I know there's a bunch of new senators who are supposed to be in student development who haven't shown up yet, and it's almost the end of the semester, so at this point it's kind of like, how are you going to be helping the committee by showing up now? So I think there needs to be a system in place that's holding people accountable, because it's not fair that these people show up every week, go to their office hours, go to committees, are putting in the effort, and then people can just say and put on their resume that they were a senator when they have done nothing. So I use my time.
Senator Taylor, you have the floor. President Dunbar, you have the floor.
So I don't want to say too much because I really do think this is like your decision, but I think like being here since my freshman year, I like always heard speakers talk about the two like Senate rule. Like you missed two unexcused Senates, like you had to have a conversation and would get brought up to Senate. And a lot of these people, once the discussion was like there, a lot of them just left because they realized that they weren't going to things. So I think this is really important. I know that people are kind of nervous about taking away like people's votes, but like Chairperson Gather said, I mean, I saw the results. I think the person who got the most votes in here got like 20 votes. So I think we really need to consider having people in here who are going to be able to actually talk and say the things that they should be like saying in front of the Senate. I think it's really nerve-wracking if we're coming into these meetings and sometimes the room's not getting filled. And I think we have such great senators here that like we really wouldn't be losing much if we ended up just enforcing the rule that's in here, which is that it gets brought to Senate after they get notified. I think it's pretty bad that we haven't been following this, just considering the whole night we keep talking about like rules and rules and rules and rules. And like I brought this rule up before and I got told there's nothing about it. So just to see that like it is in writing, I think everyone should like really, really pressure this being put in place. And it doesn't impact anyone here. Like you're all here. And I like give you props. It's about to be like 10 o'clock and you're all in here and there are people who are just kind of doing their own thing and they're saying they're senators. I think you all have the right to talk about, and that's the thing, it's not just like removing everybody, it's like figuring out what exactly you want to do with that and like bringing it up for a discussion. So I think you all really should consider the implications that there may be if you keep people who really aren't even doing anything. And I do feel for committee chairs who aren't, they have literally like 6 or 7 people at their meetings when they really should be having like 15, 16 people. I think more people on committees is only going to be able to grow the actual ideas and actually be able to do the things that are happening. I mean, if you have a committee of 6 people putting on 3 events in one day, it's unfair to them. There needs to be more accountability for committees. I mean, it's great that we have committees. I mean, I've been to Haley's meeting. She has so many people in there. Like, that's what I want at every single committee. Like, I just think there just has to be something put in place. I really do. So I don't know where that could be. I think maybe a caucus might be part of this, but just I think you should all consider it.
Yes.
Were senators ever formally notified of their committee assignments?
I believe Parliamentarian Jane. Okay, I'm going to delegate this to.
No one was actually, there was no email sent about, okay, well, you were chosen for this committee. But as Speaker 2 said, we do have the rights to go in minutes and check who has been attending their committees. With that said, there's nothing much more to say. But yes, that is something that we can put in place for next semester. If that's something that, well, we can do that now. If that's something that is amenable to everyone. Like, do it now.
Well, I mean, at this point,
Yes, go ahead.
How are we tracking if they're going to their committees if they haven't been assigned to committees?
So, currently, committee attendance is not tracked. The reason being that it's labor intensive, and it would be unfair of me to delegate the responsibility to check up on every one of you 55 senators and make sure that you attend committee. It's an honor system thing at this point. Yes. Committee attendance is always tracked, but actual attendance is not tracked by Senate leadership every year. Last year it was not. Okay, so next person on the speakers list is Chairperson.
So Irma briefly brought up a piece of the bylaw, but she didn't say it verbatim, and I think it's great if we were to hear it verbatim. So any senator with unexcused absences shall be notified in writing by any member of Senate leadership. Senators who are absent and unexcused from 2 or more undergraduate student Senate meetings per academic semester may be removed from office by unanimous vote from the Senate leadership. The Speaker shall notify the Senate at the next Senate meeting. The Senate may object the decision and has the right to overrun the decision by a 2/3 majority. This is in the rules. This is in our Constitution. So why aren't we going by it? Bylaws. Excuse me. In addition, I don't know if this is a question, but if committee meetings aren't being tracked, and in our bylaws it says this is based off of committee attendance and Senate attendance, what necessarily gives you the authority to interpret that as Senate being more important than committee? And also, what gives you the authority to interpret any of that without checking from the Senate, Exec, etc.?
So, I'll take the floor at this point. There's no one else on the speaker list. So, there are reasons that I've been lax about enforcement of this policy. I did not want to strip any member of this body of their voting rights or of their speaking rights without consenting you first. The bylaws are something that are amendable, very easily amendable, by a 2/3 vote of this body. And I think that the vote of this body is more important than some bylaw that was last amended in 2013. That's why I asked you at the beginning of the semester what you would like to do about senators who were absentee. And because the issue has dragged itself on this long, I come back to you with another ask, is how should I implement this policy? Now, I understand that committee attendance is mandated in the bylaws, right? But it would be disingenuous of me to assume that those of you who have volunteered, all of you should have volunteered to be part of a committee, just don't go to your committee. I feel like I should have at least that much trust in my senators, that you come to Senate and that you go to the committee that you said you would go to, and that you go to the office hours that you said you would go to. All of you made commitments based on your schedules, based on your availabilities, based on your priorities. And I don't think I should need to baby you into following these policies. Now, it's unfortunate, highly unfortunate, that some of you haven't followed those policies, none of which are here, by the way, which is kind of the issue. But the problem is that these people aren't making it to their one trackable, one clearly noticeable obligation, which is the Senate. Potentially, probably, definitely, the single most important commitment they make. This body oversees all the other bodies that you would sign up to be a part of. And that's why I think that tracking attendance at this body is the best place to start. If you don't attend Senate, why would you attend committee? Does my thought process make sense? I don't want for senators to be expelled by the boatload. I would rather keep as many of you here as I possibly can. And I've tried to do that through incentivization, through kudos, through involving you in procedural matters like this one, through making sure that you have a stake in discussions, to making sure that you have adequate knowledge of Robert's rules, and you have a sense of community with your fellow senators. These are all things that we've tried to build as Senate leadership to encourage you to come. And it's unfortunate that it's come to this, but it seems that the general consensus is that I will start enforcing this procedure, and I will start expelling senators. If there is dissent to that, speak now.
I yield my time.
Mr. Speaker, multiple times tonight we made very disparate comments towards my colleagues. That does go against the common law of orders. And I do have my fellow colleague point out all these leaders and choose the right people here.
Thank you, Senator. Is there any further discussion on this matter? President Miller.
So I just double checked, and actually the thing that Wawa did read is from the Constitution. So it's not just something that's like amendable, like it's in the Constitution, it should be being followed. And I think it's really, really important that we take that seriously. I understand if, I mean, I never knew this, that bylaws, you can kind of just like decide whether or not you should follow them or not, but like the Constitution's there for a reason. So it should be followed, and with that being said, I do think though it's important that this conversation maybe gets brought up later on, considering there hasn't been enforcement of Senate attendance, I mean not like Senate, but of committee attendance, like there's no oversight over that, so I actually kind of feel bad now because people weren't assigned committees and people weren't being checked on the attendance, so I think maybe this is something that we should consider afterwards once there's implementation on making sure that we are checking these things. That way we have more grounds to make sure that we're saying, hey, you were assigned this committee and you're not going to it. Because right now we don't really have that. So I do think though what Speaker Toomey said is right, like there has to be some sort of consequence. And I think that everyone had a really great discussion tonight, so thank you for voicing your opinions.
Senator Hinton.
I just have a really quick comment as well. So I try to be very organized. So I do keep attendance at my meetings, and it is something I really follow. I try to follow that. And I have noticed if people miss their 2 meetings or whatever, and I'm pretty good about following back with them. And it also, like last year, it was a problem. I had people assigned to my committee who I knew were assigned to my committee who were not following. I brought it up the time it was George who was our speaker, and it was handled in that way. So maybe this is a workshop we can like an exec we talk about, but it works really well for me. So maybe I could share what I do. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would mention.
Thank you, Chairperson. Are there any further speakers? Is there any further discussion on this item?
Just want to make a quick comment about what we were saying about how like only tracking Senate attendance is the most prominent almost, made it seem like Senate was more important than committees, and I think that came off a little wrong possibly, and possibly slightly disrespectful to our committee chairs, so I just want to bring up that both are incredibly important.
In my prior comments, I did not intend to belittle committees. What I did intend to say is that your primary commitment as a senator is to be a senator. And it's at this body where we notice your absence most significantly, if that makes sense. Obviously, the vast majority of the legislation we receive and the vast majority of the work we do as USG is done through committee. And it is equally as important that you attend your committee. I yield my time.
Are there any further? Senator Gomez. Okay. That motion, or is there a competing point or motion on the floor? Okay. Is there a second for that motion? Okay. Rose Blackburn went up first. Jake Rose Blackburn went up first. By a simple majority, we can go to adjourn. All in favor of adjourning, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, please signify by saying nay. Nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and we are adjourned. Oh, a call for division occurred? Okay. All those in favor of adjourning, please signify by saying aye. Or please raise your flag. All those opposed, please raise your flag. I've been informed
informed by SU staff that our reservation can be extended until the SU closes. Um, 11 against. Any abstentions? One from the chair. By a vote of 17 for, 11 against, and 1 abstention, the motion carries. We are adjourned at 9:30.